And we are live. This is Dark Journalists. Oh, what a fantastic crowd we have out there in the ideas from already tonight. Of course, tonight I am joined by the lovely Olivia.
Hi, everybody.
And Olivia, like heaven above me, the spy who loved me.
Mm-hmm.
There's some major spy activity in our presentation tonight that's going to surprise everyone. And by the time we're done tonight, the UFO field will not be the same.
Okay.
That's a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're going to spend a great deal of time on the UAP hearings and the classified briefings, and of course, the whistleblower, quote unquote, UFO whistleblower David Grusch, my communications with him, the cessation and the stopping of those communications, and the reasons why, and DOD official Christopher Mellon of the Mellon banking family, and UFO Cosa Nostra.
Mm-hmm.
This is very interesting, too, because there are a few factors that we're going to get into tonight, which have never been on the record. But some of the things and some of the associations involved with what's been going on with Grusch, Mellon, Elizondo, the whole thing goes into a very wrapped tight network having to do with a CIA UFO threat operation dealing with advanced technology. I'm going to expose exactly how that's worked. You've known on a number of different shows here, we've done it, but tonight is going to be kind of a little bit special in relation to this. This is Dark Journalist X-164. It's UFO Cosa Nostra. We're going to be talking about the CIA and the covert intelligence branch weighing in and invading the UFO file through the likes of Christopher Mellon and others. And we're going to put some things on the record that have not been on the record, including some aspects of a call that I had with David Grusch, but even more importantly, some of the incredible connections I found behind the CIA soiree with all those Wall Street bigwigs that took place a couple of days ago, hosting the UFO whistleblower to share secrets with these billionaires. And the whole event was held about 60 people. And this is going to get interesting because the who's who in that audience includes a whole lot of Homeland Security with all their 250,000 employees, and their recent advent into the UFO field, along with the Central Intelligence Agency and FBI agents. And then guess what? A little smattering of billionaires there as well. So it's nice to keep those UFO secrets tight in that little community. But if I told you that people along the lines of Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein were going to come up tonight, you'd say, Bill Gates, UFOs, Jeffrey Epstein, what are you talking about? I'm going to tell you, and it's going to be a mind blower. So strap in tight tonight. It's great to see everyone there in the ideas room, and this is going to be a special one. We'll go with you a couple of hours here tonight, and in the second part of the program, we will take your questions on this very important matter. And of course, I want to throw it out there to Mr. Grusch, if he's watching, that he can communicate and hop right in the chat there, and I'll send him a link to join us. Certainly he can discuss anything, and my door has been open to all of the UFO obsters, including Mellon and Elizondo and all those people, the TTSA crew, but they were always dang afraid to come on this show. And one of the reasons why is very simple, which is that with just a few questions, their connections still with the government would blow away the whistleblower tag, the whistleblower piece. And I will say that the communication with Grusch was a little different, and I felt like his testimony was going to be different. But he had been groomed and co-opted into position by the likes of Chris Mellon, by the likes of Elizondo. And so that was a problem going in. And I guess the question really was, could he get away from that? And part of the problem was that he was COO of the Soul Foundation with Mellon and Gary Nolan of the CIA UFO fam. And this is part of the problem, which is they had him kind of institutionally cocooned in. And so any allusions to this guy, being an outside whistleblower or anything of that nature fell apart with that, unless he were able, and that was part of my phone call with him. And it's interesting, too, I do want to say this, that there were aspects, I'd never reveal anything personal in relation to Grusch, but there were aspects in the conversation that were predicated on the idea of doing a series of interviews that would open up this whole subject. And so with Grusch going off the radar and then turning up at these CIA events and all that's out the window. I'm going to go on the record with the things that I think were crucial in our conversation tonight. And I want to share those with you because I'm out to smash the CIA UFO threat operation and its emergency powers that are associated with it, and to open up the real research on the UFO file that's being held by X-Protect. That's what I'm here for. And that's what we're going to do. And there's no amount of trolls or Grusch supporters or TTSA people or whatever that are going to stop us from doing that. Although they give it a good try. And like I said, the best way to try is to have a gentleman's debate right on this program. I've got it set up. It's all ready for you. Just come on and we can talk. But the problem is you're going to face tough questions here. Not News Nation. This is not softball Chris Cuomo, meeting with the Davos crowd. This is definitely different. And so I've put you on notice with that. And, I do want to say this also in relation to Grusch. We talked for over 3 hours and we had some pleasant communications and things. So, there's nothing personal in all this, but the direction that he could have gone in, I think, with all this was very different from the thing that he did. And, so to show up in the heart of this intelligence bastion with Wall Street people, and then to understand on my end the things that he was sharing with me that basically Mellon, was going to give him blowback and reprisals if he were to appear on my show. It's too much. These things can't be left in the background. They're going to come out. And they're going to come out tonight, and we're going to try an ethical, open, honest approach on the UFO file. Can you imagine that?
I
can. That's a very different kind of a thing, let's face it. So we're going to give all that a try. In the second half of the program, as I said, we're going to be taking your questions. You can ask those, and Miss Olivia is putting them together now. We're going to get to them. And before I go any further, Miss Olivia, how's the weather out there?
Great. Everybody is dying for TKO. I've got to ask you whether you have anything
The whole show is going to be, you're going to witness TKOs on the ropes during the whole show because it's TKO after TKO. And I'm going to open with one that has to do with, as I said, a spy. And you got to remember this story, especially if you're good at your Russian history, because she had penetrated into the upper levels of our government. She's a very interesting character. And her name was Anna Chapman. Do you remember Anna Chapman?
I don't.
Quite fascinating indeed. She had penetrated the upper echelon of the Obama administration. And when she was found out, she was deported. And I'm going to open things up here because I want you to know that there's a direct link with the event that Grusch was at and Anna Chapman. That's crucial. And there's a direct link with Anna Chapman and aerospace. That's also crucial. And then there's a direct link with all of this Mellon business and shutting people down from appearing on certain things. Now, as we go deeper on it, it starts to make sense that he didn't want certain things to come out. And so then there's a subtext in all this, which is, Chris Mellon, what are you hiding? And why are you bullying people to stay out of the independent media and not say certain things? That's going to be crucial. So we're bringing down the walls tonight. Okay. All right. Are you ready? This is Anna Chapman. This is the spy who set up so many repercussions and was a major story back in 2010. Now, I'm going to go into her story a little bit as to kind of set up this event that took place in New York City at a lavish penthouse with Grusch and a bunch of CIA people and a bunch of FBI agents and, those billionaires that were ready, along with some cryptocurrency people that I think you're going to find quite interesting, and mafia lawyers, speaking of UFO Cosa Nostra. She was, in fact, found guilty of espionage, and they had a big swap where they sent her and 9 other Russian agents back. She was living in Manhattan, and she'd done quite a good job for the Russians in penetrating higher levels of government. At a certain point, they became very nervous, and she had penetrated into an aspect of Hillary Clinton's upper echelon, and we're going to get into that as well. One of the things I want to point out immediately, and we've heard so much about Jeffrey Epstein and all this craziness with the new documents and everything else, is there's an Epstein connection in all this. Can you beat that? There's Bill Gates, there's Epstein. It's quite fascinating. When we get into this, all we have to do is start to track some people. And one of the people we want to track with Bill Gates is Mila Antonova. And she was, in fact, best friends with Chapman. And this is all coming together in a way that's going to really set the tone for this. But in any case, Bill got caught with his hand in the cookie jar there with her, and she was a genius who was really into bridge and chess and things. And here were the salacious headlines from that period when our friend Chapman got caught. Manhattan beauty among 10 busted as feds smash New York Russian spy ring from Russia with love. And interestingly enough, there were a number of people she was involved with, but she had a steady boyfriend. And now when we start to talk about who she is, speaking of TKOs, and her steady boyfriend, and what she did immediately upon leaving for Russia, it's going to spin some heads here in the audience. And then we're going to find the direct tie to the event that took place with Grusch, Homeland Security, CIA, FBI, and all those billionaires. And before we go any further, I want to remind you to go to darkjournalist.com, sign up for our newsletter. Now, this is interesting. We've had a lot of censorship, and people have been sending me things on a regular basis in relation to this, not getting notifications and everything else. So we're used to it. But nonetheless, the best way to get around the whole thing is to go to darkjournalist.com, sign up for our newsletter. That's a free newsletter, and it keeps us in touch with each other with all the fantastic things that we have coming up for you, including a very special broadcast on February 25th. That's a lot of advance notice for you. But other things you get in the newsletter, you're going to find interviews and all kinds of fascinating X-Series episodes, along with special events and documentaries that are all coming up. It's all there in the newsletter. So stand up and be counted and make sure you're on that newsletter list. And, you know, like I said, it takes about 10, 15 seconds to sign up. That'll be the way to guarantee that pipeline between us, because with everything that's going on, I can't really, you know, it's very hard. Sometimes people write to me and they're like, I didn't get any notification for your show. I missed it. So the best way to lock yourself in is to be on that newsletter list. I mentioned that in the second part of the program in the ideas room, we'll do your questions. So what we'll do is we'll present here for about an hour, and then we'll do about a half hour of your questions. And that should do it. Miss Olivia, you're up.
Short Order Cook 1 says, oh my God, more twisted than crochet. And Neva Moore says, honeypots. Everybody's saying honeypot, honeypot, honeypot.
It is, I mean, this is really one of the most high-level honeypot cases, in fact, and there's a lot of questions. This was before the heavy-duty stuff broke, you know, Snowden and a lot of things of this nature. Anna Chapman was born in 1982, Russian intelligence agent, media personality. When Anna Chapman went back to Russia, she developed a TV series, and the TV series was all about UFO mysteries. And that show had ran for 8 years.
Wow.
And got broadcast into Europe and had an incredible following, so much so that she became the spokesman for the bank for the aerospace companies in Russia, and also would be at all the launches whenever the Russians were launching something into space. Anna was their girl.
She was like a UFO celebrity.
She was, and she was just so hardcore in there with the aerospace aspect. Now, she had some very interesting people that she was associated with, as I said, and I'm going to get into them. But I want to lock us into this idea about what was going on there with Gates and our friend Chapman and her friend. So, so we're going to keep track of these people this way. Bill Gates' Russian lover was in contact with Kremlin spy Anna Chapman. Now, this report, again, all these stories are from 2010. You'll get a second look at some of these characters as well as we go along in the show. But they say the photo was snapped in early 2010 around the Gates' alleged romance with the Russian card whiz according to the reports. The details of how Antonova knew Chapman, the daughter of a former KGB officer, was not booted from the U.S. for espionage were not immediately clear Friday, who was booted from the U.S. for espionage. So that's Mila Antonova on the right, and she's a Russian bridge player with whom Gates allegedly had an affair. This is going to come in handy as we get into what this was all about. Now, it was interesting when I started to hear about some of the characters that were involved with the soiree that Grusch went to and presented all of this fascinating info. And I wanted that list of CIA people, and that wasn't available. But the people who were hosting it, you could get that information pretty easily. And when I tracked back on one of them, I found out that it was, in fact, the boyfriend of Anna Chapman who had hosted the entire event. And his background in aerospace, corrupt law, the State Department, and all the rest is going to be very interesting as we get along here. And it's going to bring us all around to how did they fit Grusch in the middle of all this thing? And when you start to consider Christopher Mellon and the Mellon banking family and how that's organized, that's where you're finding Grusch in the middle of all these billionaires and intelligence people with former DOD official Christopher Mellon. So we're going to go deep, deep tonight in relation to this. And we're going to try to track it through this network of people around that event, and then sitting the UFO quote whistleblower Grusch in the middle of it. And, you know, in case you've just joined us, you know, it's well known, this has gotten around, that last month I had a conversation a month ago, approximately, with David Grusch, who had reached out, and I have his email here. You know, the thing is, I think one of the things that he wanted to get on the record was this was an outreach attempt, I think, with all the things that they had coming up, and they wanted to see on their side, that is the Grusch side, you know, how far they could go in talking to me. This was a different approach than the kind of weird approach that the TTSA and others took, which were to try to take down anyone who was questioning their operation. So they'd all tried in the background to scare off anyone from coming on the show. And it worked in those cases. In this case, it was very hard to see where the block was coming from. Who was the UFO Cosa Nostra calling the shots behind there? One of the things that Grusch was able to let out, and it wasn't like he came into that conversation to tell me this, but he let it out during the course of that conversation that the reprisals that he was afraid of in terms of coming on my show and his long-term implications for this had to do with Chris Mellon. And check this out, the Mellon banking family. Mm-hmm. Now, this is interesting. We all know that John Warner IV has been on this program. And of course, Catherine Mellon is his mother, and she is the heiress to the Mellon banking fortune. Chris Mellon is from, you know, he has a different grandfather. He's from a different side of that same Mellon family. And so whereas Warner has come out and tried to do versions of disclosure himself, and he's talked all about how his cousin, who's been running this UFO threat operation, is basically deep in there with, you know, the players on the national security state side trying to come out with a story on the UFO file and bring out this kind of false rehashed version of it while hiding the real details from the public. So that's been a real clash on that side. And it's interesting because some of the most expressive comments from Grusch came in relation to this. And it was very clear to me that the person in the middle of all this was Chris Mellon. That's the person who was blocking him from considering things like talking openly and facing tough questions on a show like this, not softball News Nation questions or, you know, God love them, Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson. I mean, you know, these guys want to be seen as having a kind of a open portfolio of things they talk about, but they don't know anything about the UFO file. And that was part of the problem in dealing with people like Tucker. You know, when he sits somebody down, when he's into a subject, you know, he can really get some things out of people. But on the UFO side, they keep inviting CIA people in and buying into it and saying, oh, you know, all kinds of things. I mean, on Tucker's side, he's starting to say like, oh, you know, they told me it was a demon. There's, I mean, look, the CIA is known for, especially with these people, counterintelligence activities. Usually those activities are aimed at other countries. In this case, we're talking about counterintelligence activities against the American public to pull off the grand psyop of a UFO threat emergency powers situation. And also to roll out their version, as we say, breakaways, breaking back in, their version of why they have this advanced technology. They need a story now. And one of the most curious things about Grusch is now he's picking up all the support of the same characters like Jim Semivan, who started the false TTSA story. And it's very funny because, you know, they come out, these guys like Semivan and Elizondo, and they say that government needs to give us the truth. Look, they are the government. They still work for the government. Jim Semivan wasn't even on the record anywhere until 2012. That's how secret his activities were. He is the highest level of CIA directorate for 25 years. That's who you're dealing with. Those are the people who launched TTSA. So, you know, let's be real about who we're dealing with. And we seem to have a kind of a glib naivete and people who are just as willing to go over the water fountain with the Grusch op as they were with TTSA, which turned out to be a total flop. And even the people who defended it have to kind of admit that now, although they run away from it, including the Knapps and the Dolans of the world, you know, who just sat there and let these CIA people roll all over the UFO community and didn't stand up at all, didn't, you know, put them on the spot, didn't ask any tough questions. You know, I've always do the imitation of the kind of interviews that they got, which is like, what do you feel like? Do you feel more like a hero or a legend? The question should have been, are you still working for the government? One, are you doing counterintelligence for the government? If the government informed you as part of your counterintelligence activity, you had to lie to the public, would you do it? These are the questions. And, you know, are you working for a defense contractor? Would be another one. Are you a defense contractor? Hello, Ryan Graves, you know? So this is the nature of the situation we find ourselves in. Dealing with these people and dealing with the disconnect between the understanding of what the CIA is capable of in terms of launching operations and psyops in the American public versus this thing that, you know, jogs through Congress and says, I want UFO disclosure. I even know where they're hiding the bunkers of UFO technology. Doesn't work that way. There is a way to get at that stuff, but it's not, you know, Tim Burchett with Chris Mellon's whistleblower. That's not how it operates. Let's go a little bit into Grusch, and you know, I'll try to be fair all the way through, but I have to say that Grusch has one tendency that I want to put on the record here, which is he kind of talks out of two sides of his mouth. And on one hand, he sounds very convincing about certain facts, and then he will contradict himself later. Now, one of these examples that's been going around, and it's very classic, and I have it here as well, and I'm going to go through all the evidence at the end of the show, is what he said to me in our conversation was that he got into UFOs because of the Leslie Kean article in the New York Times, which was all this phony rollout of CIA Lou. And Lou was, you know, a disgruntled employee who wanted the UFO truth. Damn, he wanted that truth out there. And, but what they forgot to mention was that he still worked for the government and that there was no big resignation. None of that stuff happened. It was just a good story. And part of the Leslie Kean op, they were very concerned with not getting into alien bodies and things of this nature. They wanted to get into this idea of a threat that was out there so they could build a UFO defense office, which they did, which is called NRO, which is now funded, you know, billions of dollars every year. That whole thing with NRO becomes a gateway too, because even though it's at a small level right now, they're going to expand it dramatically. And we'll get into how they can do that through different types of aerial phenomena. Hello, Chinese balloon from last year. So you might remember classically the COG Northcom commander coming out and saying, hey, you know what? There's a threat out there and it might be extraterrestrial, you know, and hey, we shot down UFOs. So the Chinese balloon thing and some of the facts that have come out about it are crucial to all this. So keep that in the back of your head, that the threat from the sky aspect becomes crucial. Okay. So what I mean about Grusch talking out of both sides of his mouth, Grusch told me that, as I said, and he said that he discovered this program in 2019, the X series, the show we do here, and that he enjoyed it. He learned a lot from it, the mystery schools, the UFO file, and it helped him. It jump-started him in his UFO activities. Well, great. The only problem is when he's speaking to the inspector general with the documents that came out now, um, he says there from 2021 that he's been studying and deep into the UFO thing for 15 years, which takes you back to 2006, not 2019 or 2017 when the Leslie Kane article came out. Now, look, anyone can make a mistake. I make them all the time. But here's the thing. When you're an intelligence officer, you don't mess dates up. I can tell you that for a fact. I know some intelligence people. They're never going to mess up things like that. So there's a moving around of the story for convenience and to blow off any heat and deflect any tough questions. One of the problems with what happened there with the setup with Grusch was Mellon knows that if he comes on a program like this and I ask him tough questions, he's just going to be there deflecting all day. So someone in that team thought maybe what they could do is sort of in the background pepper me with little things and say like, oh, hey, you'll be on the inside, you'll get some information. And that I would just, sort of hang out there while they were running away with the UFO file. But that's not going to happen. And
like a little dog giving you treats,
I
right,
think,
to calm you down.
And I also think that the whole idea was, the more people we can keep off the back of this operation, the better. Now, let's get into a few things. UAP whistleblower David Grusch forced to drop out of appearances for safety concerns. This is another false thing that they're waving out there with Grusch. He went on, the Joe Rogan show, and he went on Tucker and all that. And this whole thing about, security concerns and danger and all, there's none of that in relation to this story. What is, when you show up in a room full of CIA and FBI people, that's, it's dangerous on a different kind of a level. But the level that they're talking about and what they've been trying to push, especially with Corbell and all the rest of it. So Corbell now had a TMZ thing with his jellyfish UFO and all the rest of it. This is the sideshow that goes on, and these are the money makers. And of course, Corbell had the unbelievable audacity to say he wasn't making any money from this when people know that he's been buying houses for $1.8 million and he's got all these film deals from these documentaries and TV deals. No, he's cleaning up and making tons of money from it. But, I don't have a problem with people making money. I just don't like the circus of the phony Corbell stuff. So I try to give people the real thing. And I think the year 2024 is all about potent information. If you wanted fluff, hey, just go resuscitate the blue chicken op. I mean, you got plenty of fluff at Gaia, rehabilitate, get David Wilcock out of rehab. And, so if you want junk, there's tons of it to be had. If you want something potent, though, there's a way to get it. And that's what I'm here for. That's what I'm presenting. And I would like these people as well to be going after the potent stuff, but they have their own trajectory. Very often, I want to point this out too, is I don't really get into other researchers' stuff. Anyone can research whatever they want and do whatever they want with it. The problem with the CIA false disclosure op is it's infecting everything from marketing. It's infecting politics. It's infecting everywhere you turn. So it has to be stopped, because on the level that it's at, it's going to become an unstoppable force. And you have people actually believing the junk that they're putting out when I can prove it wrong. And I'm going to prove tonight that there's a lot of engineering going on in the background, and that engineering is going on through the figure of Christopher Mellon, and the classic case of it through whistleblower Grusch. And again, Grusch's story, love to believe him, love to have that all on the record, but it's shifting a lot. Remember in the beginning, Grusch said, well, I didn't actually see anything. It was all secondhand. Somebody told me about this when I was doing interviews for the UAP task force. Now the story is, oh, gee, I did see things actually, but I was waiting to be cleared to say it. Doesn't work that way, because even back then you could say, I'm waiting to be cleared to tell you. So the story is shifting. And when stories shift, that's the sign of a counterintelligence plan. When a particular story is not working, you switch it. Those are classic plans. And so you have to get real with that. So if you want a real story about this, you're going to have to go deeper than just somebody showing up with an entertainment jellyfish video. And this is important, I think. Yeah.
On the stand, he would not be a credible witness because of
No.
that.
That's an excellent point. And by the way, I wish he would be, and I wish he would come out with the truth. And I think there were times in our conversation I could hear, tension that related to the truth as he was trying to tell me things. But in particular, a kind of anxiety when the Mellon part came up, and not just Christopher Mellon, but apparently the Mellon family. I found that interesting. I'm going to ask John about that as well. He can give us some idea. Okay, so they went along with this story saying, so Grusch went to the soiree with the CIA people, but the reason he canceled, supposedly, now he was on Rogan, they're saying he canceled this follow-up, was for security reasons. I haven't heard any confirmation of that. It sounds like a Corbell story that they just like throwing out there. The scheduled chat was hindered when Grusch failed to appear. Yeah, that would tend to do it. Citing a security concern in the aftermath of his whistleblower testimony to Congress as the reason. According to Corbell, look, man, reprisals are real, Corbell said in the documentary. Yeah, reprisals from Chris Mellon to Grusch, if he comes on a show like this and says real stuff, those reprisals are real. The effect of trying to silence people is absolutely real as well. Exactly, Corbell. Mellon trying to silence Grusch is absolutely disgusting. He then speaks out about his experiences trying to gather evidence from witnesses who often fear they would face consequences as they speak out. Now, look, the UFO story, there's a lot of opportunists who just come in. And for years, there's been real witnesses who've had real stories and real experiences. I've talked to some of the best over the years. I was lucky enough to meet some of the great researchers before they passed away, including John Mack and Jim Mars, Stanton Friedman, and they went into very great depth with me. We would, in the case of Friedman, we met for hours and talked for hours. Jim Mars, and these people had talked to a number of witnesses, and this is, the UFO story has nothing to do with the government, in fact, in terms of getting to the bottom of things. You don't get the truth from the government. This is a very important thing for us to realize. But one thing I do want to put on the record in relation to this is when you come out and say you're a UFO whistleblower and you've seen, craft from another planet, or, you have evidence for it or whatever, you, as part of investigative journalism, it is adversarial journalism. It's not personal. It can never be personal, but it's adversarial, which means you're going to get tough questions. And then when you send minions out, or bots out saying, oh, you're attacking the whistleblower and all this kind of stuff. No, because if you're going to make a claim like that, everyone in the world is going to, it's the equivalent of taking a shower in the middle of rush hour in Times Square. Every little aspect of your life is going to be studied because you've made this tremendous claim. And other people would say, like, in the case of Grusch, he talked about concerns he had for his wife and things. Absolutely. But, the thing is, in relation to your wife or somebody, don't put them on camera in these documentaries that you do, as you've done in some of those. If you want to keep people around you safe, keep them away from your wild story, especially if you're pumping it out there under Chris Mellon restrictions. And there were things that I mentioned in relation to Chris Mellon, Elizondo, and the rest of the team. And there were times when Grusch was saying, well, they really want to ride my coattails. I found that interesting because really Grusch has his own story, but these people had kind of groomed him, and it's like a mafia thing in a way. Once they groom you, they own you, baby. And that's UFO Cosa Nostra. So you have to be careful about this in the beginning. There is a way to get around it, but you can't be the COO of their company and then say, oh, those damn guys, So it's just like when we're talking about Semivan and all that. These people cannot come on and say, damn that government, give us UFO information. When you're at that level of CIA director, you can get access to the UFO file. He knows all about the UFO file. So there are games, intelligence games, government games, and marketing games, all going on at the same time around the subject, and they're going into overdrive for 2024. That's what we're talking about here tonight. Everyone, you're here with us, Dark Journalist X Series 164, going deep now tonight. This is UFO Cosa Nostra. and it's the covert CIA invasion of the UFO file. We're going to be taking your questions shortly here, but I think we opened getting a pretty clear idea that there was something deeper going on with the people who hosted the UFO, quote, whistleblower, unquote, David Grusch, in Manhattan at this fancy penthouse with CIA and Homeland Security. We're going to be taking your questions in the second half before I go any further. Miss Olivia, how are you doing out there?
Good. Kate says, I think Mellon is unhappy Grusch talked to DJ and now is trying to prevent him from coming on the show.
Yes.
There is that possibility.
Yeah.
Or there is also the possibility that Grusch was assigned to talk to you.
Yes.
That he was being monitored while he was talking to you.
No question.
And that he was told not to basically cut off communication.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Whatever they wanted to do in relation to that call, I think, didn't work because the cutoff after the fact, the idea was we were going to have a series of conversations. And that's where the whole, hey, we'll build up, a series of things behind the scenes. And then, maybe you can come out and talk about it, because the whole idea is to become public and get this out in a transparent fashion instead of, just floating these things out. And very often, I would hear Grusch repeating points that came directly from the show, and I know that he said he watched it and stuff. So I said, well, if you're going to go out there and talk about these points, if you want to be transparent, why not just, throw in, resign as COO over there and stop being the puppet of Mellon and Grusch. But this is where the apprehension came in. And I think Grusch was basically saying that it was impossible for him to do that. Okay, that's one thing. But the part of them blocking him from talking with people like me in this arena is very dangerous. And I've been looking, I know a certain amount of figures involved in this who have been blocking things off from coming out to the public, and especially from coming on a show like this. But in this case, when Mellon came up, it was very clear that Mellon was the one this was the real trigger for Grusch not coming on this show and really speaking his mind. And the thing is, he owes that to you. So forget about me and my show or whatever. But the ideas from, especially if he's been watching and he knows the quality of the information we put out on the show and the quality of this audience, he's going to talk about these things. Then it's going to be more than just a Mellon marketing plank, and then off to Congress to go get them to fund a UFO defense office, and for Wall Street billionaires with very shady ties in their background. That whole thing, that's a disgrace, in my opinion. And I'm putting it on the record. So, it's either you're for transparency and you want to bring this stuff out,
or you're for profit.
Yeah, you're for profit in a show, and some people might say, well, Grusch, we don't know if he took a fee for this. Look, it doesn't matter. You're sitting around there with billionaires in the CIA. That's your audience. These are the people. And they're trying to plug into this network. I've seen a lot of them do it. Somebody in the background is whispering to them, UAP technology, UFO technology. This is the stuff that's coming out. The breakaways, they're going to be doing this. That's why you see weird Congress people coming forward and talking about interdimensional entities. Have you ever seen that before? If you want 2024 to get any stranger, just Anna Paluna Luna. And she came out today and she was talking about Grusch, and she said, well, I think that he said they're interdimensional entities. This is where it's going. Next you'll have Nancy Pelosi saying, I have seen the alien light, so even though she's retired and off to the Nancy Pelosi retirement home. All right, no mean comments about Nancy Pelosi. Here is a shot of Grusch giving that groundbreaking news to those billionaires. But remember, in the middle of those billionaires was some of this Cosa Nostra activity, and that has to do with the boyfriend of Anna Chapman who hosted it. That is a major figure, and we're going to get to him in just a minute. I did mention Anna Luna, and what she said, her actual quote was, I think it's important to listen to the specific words of Grusch, and what he uses. Grusch never said extraterrestrial or alien. He said interdimensional. So she's suggesting, I think that we can get through with this interdimensional thing, and somehow the extraterrestrial thing, now that's out, baby. Anna Luna's looking for interdimensionals. She also suggests bringing Grusch back into Congress to testify. This is already going to happen. They're already arranging that, I can tell you that. But why is she and select other, she's a Republican, but Democrat congressman, they're talking about interdimensionals. What is that about? Why are they interested in switching the theme? Do they feel like people won't buy the outer space part, or does it give space more scrutiny? And when they're developing a secret space program up there, is that such a good idea to have people say, oh, hey, there are aliens coming from up there? Oh, no, they're interdimensionals who warp in and out. They're under the ocean, so you can never see them. I want to get to a couple of things around. I want you to keep in mind in terms of Christopher Mellon. Christopher Mellon's a former DOD official from the Clinton administration, the first Clinton, and that's Bill Clinton, and he stayed over during the Bush administration. So there's all those deep state connections that he has from both administrations. And so he's an intelligence official. Now, there he is, of course, with his pal Lou Elizondo, who they dusted out originally out of the TTSA op. That's DeLong standing there as well. This op failed dramatically because of their bizarre claims, because Tom DeLong was the bobo that they tried with it, and because Elizondo tended to lie his face off in public and not be able to cover it. But Mellon was behind it all the way. And remember, Mellon's the bank. So that's a very important piece. Mellon's new face on the scene is Grusch. So just think of Mellon as kind of a UFO pimp in Cosa Nostra terms. Now, government UFO whistleblower claims he gave secret presentation to CIA, FBI officials. If anyone is wondering about that list, I want to go into this in terms of the actual event here for a moment. So there's a series of articles, and there were people inside the event who talked about the things that were presented and all the rest. And one of the things that they were trying to push is something that we talk about on this show a great deal, which is the UFO file factor in election 2024. And it seemed to me that they were kind of picking up on the talking points because, again, remember that they need a story to break in with this technology in. Now, if there's a major UFO event in 2024, and for sure there's going to be, then they need the setup for it as well. UFO whistleblower, former U.S. intelligence officer David Grusch, claims he has had secret talks with Wall Street bigwigs and the CIA in Manhattan. Grusch, a veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, by the way, and NRO, they're all trained by CIA people. That's the connection in there. And the National Reconnaissance Office, which had been secret for 30 years, by the way, from 61 to the 90s, has been the center of attention in the world of UFOs since this past June, when he claimed the United States has retrieved and studied UFOs of non-human origin as well as alien bodies. Yeah, biologics is the way that he put it. So there was a lot of loose terms there. And all the headlines, UFO whistleblower held secret talk with Wall Street bigwigs and CIA officials where he claimed U.S. was in possession of 40-foot TARDIS-like craft that was the size of a football field when you stepped inside. I found this interesting, too, because, it was John Warner who put on the record this football field-sized UFO that his grandfather confessed to him. And I think it's interesting that they're stressing that one. And so they go into different details about this, and they did their own deep diving at Daily Mail and at other newspapers trying to find out who was behind this. And it's interesting because as we were, kind of in the middle of looking at this, and some of the people like Jay Stratton from Radiance Technologies, who's involved in this, and that's somebody who very openly talks about redeveloping UAP technology. And of course, it's UFO technology. That's their phony UAP term. Now, what's interesting for me is when you get these people and you start to look at who's setting things up, the two sponsors of this show were Anna Chapman's boyfriend, a lawyer who we're going to get into in a minute, and also who's connected with Epstein and Bill Gates, and also this fellow D'Agostino, who is the head of Coinbase, which controls all the cryptocurrencies. And he's a major cryptocurrency consultant. So that's the main guy you're going to go to if you're talking about that. So when we start to look at the forces around it, we see cryptocurrency through Coinbase. We see the CIA, the FBI, Homeland Security, and we see this figure in the middle who was associated with this, had this girlfriend for many years who was part of this Russian spy ring, who was in aerospace and ran a UFO, very popular UFO show in Europe and Russia. So you have connections immediately when you're looking at the event to kind of the worst part of this entire thing. You know, it's kind of like the black budget on display there. And in the middle of it, Chris Mellon has placed his whistleblower to give a presentation about emerging technologies and all these secrets I can give you about things I've found out. So we start to get to the heart of what's been going on and what their aim is in relation to it. And when I get to the actual aim of what they're talking about, you're going to be amazed. As I said, before we're done tonight, the entire UFO field is going to be thrown upside down. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. We are here. It's X Series 164. This is UFO Cosa Nostra. We're going to take your questions here in about a half hour. And before I go any further, Miss Olivia, you're up.
And John Madry says, every con has to have a bit of truth for the con to be successful. The possibility of interdimensionals could be quite real.
Oh, this has come up. That's what I mean. It's nothing new. It's just, look, this reminds me of when, you know, I was putting out there these different pieces about how the CIA was invading the UFO file. And Richard Dolan was very against this idea because I think it was, you know, rocking the very people that he's trying to work with. And so he was, you know, bringing forward this idea, oh, no, there are factions and people like Lou and Grusch, they're heroes inside this faction that wants to do this. And suddenly he discovered the word faction. And I was like, you know, I think since I was a 9-year-old kid, I've been reading about factions. So there's nothing new in the word factions or, oh, hey, that's a great discovery. There are factions. Yeah, there's factions, all right, especially around secret stuff. You know, you go back to the Roman Empire, there's factions. The point is that what they do is they hand select different things that are already there in the organic tapestry of UFO information. So, you know, whether it's abductions, craft, missing time, interdimensional entities, the whole thing is there. People like John Keel studied it, Jacques Vallée and all the rest of it. They're just picking out the things that they want to do, and they're running down the football field with it. Just like when TTSA came out, their whole thing was basically that the UFO file was discovered in 2017. That's how they would like it, because without that history, you'd never figure out what was actually going on. The place that they're pushing it to, I would say, is a very dark place in this sense, which is the idea is to cover the actual story and to bring forward a story that incorporates some of these elements. So we're going to talk about how they did that. I still want to get through the figures, though. So now let's talk about Anna Chapman's boyfriend. And remember, without Anna Chapman's boyfriend, no soiree, no billionaires, no Grusch whistleblowers standing in the middle of Homeland Security, none of it. It's him and D'Agostino from Coinbase who host the whole thing. That just happened, by the way. This is not an event that took place a while ago. That's like a few days ago. All right. Remember that Chapman, her best friend, had the affair with Bill Gates, and that Epstein tried to use that as a way to manipulate Gates. Keep this in mind. Remember, Chapman is the girlfriend of the person who hosted the event. Oh, one quick thing, which is I mentioned that Anna Chapman, in addition to doing all this UFO stuff with her show, Mysteries of UFOs and things in Russia, that she became a very popular space celebrity in Russia. And there she sees off the space crew. And so her roots run deep. And it's interesting because what I found interesting was that all the aerospace companies that bank in Russia with certain banks, that they try to centralize all these aerospace companies into one bank. And she became the representative, the face, the advertising campaign, as it were. This is a shot of John Altarelli with her and some others at one of these soirees before the big bust. John Altarelli, and some of the headlines about him are very interesting. From Air Force to Wall Street's leading corporate lawyer. He's also known as a disaster of a lawyer too. He's lost a lot of money, had a lot of bankruptcies, come back strong. Other firms have thrown him out. He's had, the misfortune of having a Russian spy as a honeypot. Or was that a misfortune? Did he know all along? Well, they did ask him that question. Did you know that she was a spy? His answer, very lawyerly, no comment. But that's what we're talking about there with Altarelli. We're talking about a little UFO Cosa Nostra. You know what I'm saying? This guy directly out of The Godfather, something of that figure.
What a shot.
But so they say he's come a long way from his days in the United States Air Force, where he managed large-scale construction projects for 6 years. And then he's known as Wall Street's leading corporate lawyer. Well, he's known as other things in different circles too. One of the interesting nicknames that he has is Rainmaker, by the way, which I found fascinating. But he got a really bad reputation for having her as a girlfriend. And yeah, very interesting. After serving in the Air Force, Altarelli graduated from Southern Connecticut State University, and he was at Cornell Law School. He advised clients on various transactions, mergers, and acquisitions. M&A. That's right. You need to be a certain type of on-the-spot lawyer for those. And he was, New York State Bar, but he got himself involved, and he was known as a conduit and a gateway to all these kind of international finance people and high levels of the United States government. And that's what became important for Anna Chapman to target him. And remember, Anna Chapman coming out of this whole situation and going right into a UFO network TV show in Russia, and then representing all these aerospace companies and basically being a space celebrity. Okay. Terrorverse Salon hosts UFO whistleblower David Grusch. This is the salon. This is our friend Altarelli. He had Grusch there performing like a SEAL for these billionaires and CIA people. And he was joined by the Coinbase, the guy who runs Coinbase. As part of Terrorverse Salon, John Altarelli welcomed David Grusch, former U.S. intelligence officer, revealing new details about the U.S.'s UAP retrieval program. According to Daily Mail, the attendees included officials from FBI, CIA, Department of Homeland Securities, and Wall Street bigwigs. That's a quote from Grusch himself. Gee, those Wall Street bigwigs. That's what you want to do when you're a truth teller. Get with the Wall Street bigwigs. I worked with those guys, Wall Street bigwigs, for a number of years. They have nothing to do with transparency, I can tell you that. During the event, Grusch claimed the United States was in possession of a 40-foot TARDIS-like craft. I went into that already, but in any case, we're starting to get the picture here, and I want to really keep locking us back, because what this incident reminds me of with the soiree and Grusch and Anna Chapman connected boyfriend and her connections to this woman who was hooked up with Gates, and Epstein trying to blackmail Gates as in relation to this, reminds me of this story that Professor Peter Dale Scott talks about how he uses this term, the deep state. And this comes out of a news story in Turkey, where in a car crash, there were a number of interesting people all in one car. One of the people were the head of the police. Another one was a leading member of parliament. Another one was a member of the Wolves, which was the top drug trafficking gang in Turkey at the time. And the other one was a beauty queen. And there was a word there that they used in Turkish that was roughly translated to deep state. And that kicked in for Peter Dale Scott. And the professor thought, I've been doing deep politics all these years. It's a deep state. The whole thing is a deep state. And when you have those correlations, when they crisscross, that's when you know you're onto something. And the correlations that we have here, CIA, Homeland Security, FBI, Anna Chapman, hosting Grusch, UFO, Mellon banking, you've got your UFO Cosa Nostra right there. The question is, what is a kickoff event for 2024? What is the direction that that group is moving in, and why the presence of the billionaires? I'm going to get that in a moment. A little more on just to back up what I was saying about Anna Chapman. Russian spy Anna Chapman, new face of Moscow Bank. Now, very interesting thing about this bank, as I mentioned, Russian spy Anna Chapman becomes new celebrity face of a Moscow bank, Fond Service Bank, which works with Russian companies in the aerospace industry, said Monday that it had hired Chapman to bring innovation to its information technologies. It did not escape Russians' attentions that the initials of the bank, FSB, are the same as Russia's main spy agency. It's not immediately clear if the bank was genuinely interested in her IT knowledge or just using her for her fame and connections. Well, there's definitely a reason. Now, there's an interesting story that got brushed aside, and the FBI talked it down dramatically as soon as they deported her. And that was, did Anna Chapman try to seduce an Obama official? Now, a lot of people looked into it, and their sources were saying that the person that they were penetrating into using her was directly connected to Hillary Clinton. Momentarily famous Russian spy Anna Chapman was deported to Russia. Obama officials were worried she was getting near an official in Obama's inner circle. On a new BBC series called Modern Spies, Frank Figluzzi, the head of the counter intel for the FBI, said Chapman was a real threat, but will not name the Obama official in question. And they never did. Now, what he did say on the record, and I found this interesting for an FBI guy, he said she got closer and closer to higher and higher ranking leadership. She got close enough to disturb us. We were becoming very concerned. Chapman was getting close enough to a sitting U.S. cabinet member that we thought we could no longer allow this to continue. Now, it came up later that the person was directly associated with Hillary Clinton. For a moment, when I was reading it, I thought it could have been Clinton herself. As we've heard those stories for years. But what's interesting is the cover story that comes out. So the cover story comes out 3 years later and says, oh, no, like all that speculation by the FBI of it being related to Clinton's totally wrong. And like, it was just somebody else we were interested in, and we did the right thing, and forget about it. Don't mention it. Don't mention her name again. Leave us alone. All right. Now a level deeper. Bill Gates. We know what Bill Gates is involved in. We've talked about him for many years. People have put a number of things on the record in relation to Bill Gates. I don't even need to go into his sordid background, his role in the vaccines, his buying up of farmland, all the various stories about him, the backdoors he installed in all the Microsoft software. This guy's a direct conduit for the deep state. You know, we know it quite well. Bill Gates' alleged former Russian lover linked to Kremlin spy Anna Chapman. Billionaire Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates' alleged Russian lover was linked to the notorious spy Anna Chapman shortly before the secret agent's New York City bust in 2010. Mila Antonova, the decades younger bridge player with whom Gates allegedly had an affair, was captured in a photograph strolling near Wall Street with the flame-haired former femme fatale. Now, there were a number of stories that came out about who this woman was in relation to Gates. And after a while, it became clear, there were stories that came out that Epstein had financed her and her education, and that she was basically gathering information on Bill Gates, whether they used that to blackmail him. There are stories like that. It's hard to say, but certainly she's involved on that level. So think there you have this chief of technology industry who goes into the vaccine thing, who's really into farmland, which is pretty scary now. And then you see when you get around the UFO file and how it crisscrosses into these other areas, you realize that our ignorance around the UFO file in the general public and the fluff stories or chasing jellyfish on TMZ or, you know, the dumb Corbell stories and all that kind of stuff, that there is a danger of missing the real story. And that's what I object to with the entertainment side. You know, some people will watch shows like Ancient Aliens. All I can tell you is, you know, it's very fluffy stuff. It is not potent, and it is there basically to entertain. And as a matter of fact, I remember one of the producers it was funny because I had weird dealings with one of the people over there at Ancient Aliens. One of those producers gave an article here for the Boston Globe, and she was just saying, "Oh, I don't believe in any of this tripe. But people like it, so we keep doing it." That's what you get. 20 seasons of that. Eventually, they'll have Giorgio, in a wheelchair with white hair, like I saw a saucer at the pyramid. It's going to happen. So that's the level of UFO world they're going to have, and you're going to have this kind of Grusch sideshow. It's coming. But what you can have instead, and what I think this is the split, is that the field is so important. Look at the work that we've done in this show. Look at the work of Dr. Joseph Farrell around the UFO file. Other people, Walter Bosley, there's such a deeper core to this. There are so many things that can be found, and we've tried to bring them out here on this show. And you have to really understand the depth of the UFO file, because when I see people running over a cliff with the Epstein stories and stuff, what occurs to me is the number of aerospace companies that are involved around the Epstein story. And then, of course, what's going on with the craze in the hot zone and all their knowledge about Atlantis and all the rest of it. And basically, the general public working with the Stephen Hawking stories. And, this guy, this, triple quadriplegic involved in sex orgies. Look, we reported on that story 5 years ago. This is crucial. Go to an episode called The Colonel in the Hot Zone, because it's all about his connection, Marvin Minsky's connection with this Colonel Sanders family and their search for Atlantis in the hot zone. That's what he's doing there. That's why Ghislaine Maxwell, that's why Jeffrey Epstein are taking him down in a sub called Atlantis. They want to look at Atlantean ruins, because remember, the story is from the mystery schools, the work of Edgar Cayce, Steiner, and others. It was an advanced civilization. Their technology was advanced. And there are whole aspects around it, including the Belial cult and these other factors that are involved. So the public, the general public, is going to be fed this thing. And it's like, oh, hey, it's disclosure. Look, they're going after this, blackmail financier who's dead. And they're rolling some of those stories out. As a matter of fact, some of the stuff, it's just like the JFK records. Some of the stuff that's coming out is already out. And I see people struggling, and they're like, we can do this name, we can reveal this name. And it's already been revealed in documents that were let out about Epstein 5 years earlier. This happens in the JFK records. There were all these people in 2021 who thought, oh, there are all these new records. And I looked at the records and I realized those are the same ones that they released in 2009. It's a weird shell game. It gives a lot of headlines, and then that's it. That's the way that they've decided to. It's kind of like a steam valve. So I just want to bring it around to Gates again, because remember, Gates, Epstein's bridge chess girl, Anna Chapman's boyfriend, power player, aerospace, billionaires, CIA, the soiree in Manhattan with Grusch in the middle of it. That is the circle we need to complete if you're going to get anywhere on this. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. This is X Series 164. It's UFO Cosa Nostra, baby. We're going deep here with you with the covert CIA infiltration of the UFO file through the figure of Christopher Mellon and David Grusch, the whistleblower, who attempt to contact me. Didn't probably go the way that they wanted it to, unfortunately. And I'm, duty bound to kind of get a lot of this on the record. We're going to be taking your questions in the second half of tonight's program, and we're running late on that already. So we'll do that in about 15 minutes. I've got more here to blow your mind with. What I want us to take away is just how deep the levels go when you're working with the real UFO file, and how it's a lot deeper than, some guy in his shorts yelling on a cell phone and then making a TMZ show out of it. I was joking that they should have called it Corbell's living room, because they made the whole thing with him yelling at his iMac. He's like, oh my God, Bob Lazar is here. And they have the camera go to his, like, anyone can shoot that. What's this? And when you get TMZ involved in the UFO file, they used to chase after the Kardashians, and they're like, she had butt surgery. Look, I mean, these are not the people that are going to go deep on the UFO file. I'm sorry. All right. What have you got, Miss Olivia?
Gigi Young says UFO Cosa Nostra is Belial faction, unfortunately.
Yes.
And Happy Hermit 3D says Bill Gates and Epstein are a natural match. Epstein wants compromising info, and Gates has a backdoor onto the hard drives of every Microsoft device in the world.
Whoa. Boy, that is really... This was the interesting thing because I came into a lot of technology, and I ran a technology magazine for Apple for a number of years. And so technology was always fascinating to me. And it always seemed to me that so much of the stuff was held back. And that, in fact, even the stuff that we had really seemed dated in a way. And when I talked to, there were some people at MIT, I talked to one guy who told me that everything that they had in the 2012 operating system, they already had in 1968. So you think about that in terms of the levels. So if we think about that, that's like 40, 50 years that they're ahead of us generally. So you have to keep that in mind when you have all these struggles about artificial intelligence and these headlines with these, hand wringing. What are we going to do about that AI? They already know. I mean, it is scary how it's going to be implemented, but they already have tested it out on the inside about what it can do, what it's capable of, the errors it will make, the casualties that will be involved with the errors that it makes, all these things. And they've deduced from a business standpoint, you can't resist it. But, there's a very interesting story that I got when I was working on the Nixon story about his UFO documentary that he was working on. He was going to put it out in 1974. And he had the filmmaker, Bob Emenegger, gave him access to the Pentagon. One of the things that Emenegger saw in the Pentagon, and Emenegger passed on recently, but he got some very good things on the record. One of the things that he saw was these soldiers who in that period had electrodes in their head, and they were told to visualize things like visualize a grasshopper, visualize a dinosaur or something. And the squiggly lines on the screen starting to make the shapes that they were thinking. That is the kind of mind read technology that's going on deep in those places. So like Meta, Facebook, all that stuff, that's the stuff that they want to roll out. And I'm already seeing signs of the social media being able to read us. So of course they're recording us all the time. And, I always make a joke that, if I talk about a classic album or something like that, then all these music ads come up Facebook, and I've shown Olivia examples when this happens, but it happens, and for so many people, and so that's eavesdropping. But they're getting to the level where they're going to roll out this kind of mind read. They're locking in with that, and part of that has to do with the facial recognition and the eye scan that goes on that helps them to read the mind of the individual involved. That stuff's going to be very scary because it reminds me very much of what Rudolf Steiner was warning about when he was talking, in the anthroposophy terms about Ahriman giving everyone clairvoyance that would see things just a little bit differently. So it's sort of like pick up your iPhone and you're clairvoyant. So, these things, we have to be aware of the era that we're in. And part of this has to do with them keeping us kind of locked in on the UFO file, and really not allowing, sort of 80 years of that history to come out. It's a much longer history, of course, but at least the 80 years since the national security state got their hands on it. Okay, I wanted to mention just a funny thing in the middle of all this, because Grusch is the COO of the Soul Foundation. Now, it was interesting because Gary Nolan, when he was giving interviews about this foundation, the guy was like, oh, you think people will, give you money? And, that would be nice. Grants, things. And he's like, I'm not talking just about small money. Like, I'm going to get big money for that. So Nolan has big dreams. Nolan, of course, being this Stanford University professor, I want to put a few things out there about Nolan. One is that he had originally blocked me like all of the TTSA-oriented people did. Recently, within the last 2 weeks, he unblocked me, which I found really interesting. What does that mean? But there's Nolan talking there about the Soul Foundation, which has, of course, listed Christopher Mellon as a director, and his underling is COO Grusch. Now, Grusch, in the resume he submitted to Congress, put on the record experience May 2023. That's pretty recent to present. Chief Operating Officer of the Soul Foundation, managing day-to-day operations for a 501c3 federally recognized nonprofit. This is the UFO consultant nonprofit things. We'll go around and we'll come up with these different things. This is part of that UFO money wave that I've been talking about. So that's on the record here. Now, the Soul Foundation itself is registered in Huntsville, Alabama. That's very interesting because everyone knows that as Paperclip Central. The director here, just to put on the record, Christopher Mellon's the director. Gary Nolan incorporated it. Gary Nolan, and we have Grusch there as the COO. Okay, those are the people involved. Now, when I put it on the record that Grusch was indicating that the interference with coming on the show and getting, tough questions and things was from Chris Mellon. So Mellon is in effect his boss in this foundation. So instead of being, hey, I'm a whistleblower and, I've had these things to say to the public or whatever, he's under the thumb of this billionaire family DOD official who's telling him who he can play with in the public. That's bad. That's very bad for transparency, and it's undeniable. And it's very clear on my side and on their side that we have the conversation. It's well documented and all the rest of it. So the point is, you have to look at it like this: that he's not a real whistleblower. Instantly, his whistleblower status goes out the window. I indicated that to him, and he seemed to have in his mind that he could play all sides of everything. And I told him I didn't think it was possible. And also, what was it that he needed to be involved with them over? It didn't make sense to me if he had his own story that he needed to be, involved with the Mellon Elizondo TTSA leftovers,
Don't rate me much.
It starts to become pretty clear that the person who's navigating this whole thing is Christopher Mellon. It's important that we got to that point. I want to say this too about Gary Nolan, because I met with dropped jaws in the UFO community. They cannot accept this fact. I've put it on the record before. I'm going to show it here again. Gary Nolan is friends with Fauci, Dr. Fauci. Yes. Dr. Death himself is a friend of his, and Nolan thinks that Fauci is the greatest thing in the world. When Fauci retires, because, he's afraid he's going to be investigated, Nolan says, "Thank you, Dr. Fauci, for your tremendously positive contributions to immunology and virology." You're not going to deny that. That's Gary Nolan talking to his friend there in the picture, Fauci. So, those are just facts of life for people on the UFO side who don't want to, there's cognitive dissonance there because they're like, but Gary Nolan's supposed to be about UFO transparency, but he's friends with the desk killer himself. So, and these people who lie in government flock together. That's the nature of the thing. So has he ever been pressed in any conversation about his relationship to Fauci? No. Everybody gets softballs. Somebody mentioned something to me about Gary Nolan and Lex Friedman. And it's all, let me tell you, those might be nice guys or whatever, but when you're asking questions that don't have any merit, what's the point? Why not just have somebody show up and you read their, publication talking points and let them go? For me, when you have someone like that in front of you, you say, okay, so you're working and you've been working for over a decade for the CIA in addition to being a Stanford professor, right? Yes. So all the stuff that you're talking about in terms of UFOs, including the fact that you say that you were an abductee when you were a kid as a paper boy, and it was, it's like the ET thing where Gary Nolan is riding along and he sees a UFO and then he's riding across the moon, is that story real? Is Jim Semivan's story real about being abducted? Well, these are CIA people. So are they just taking the whole thing about the contactees and saying, well, people will listen to contactees, we have to get rid of that? I'll tell you what, we'll give them intelligence contactees. Those can be your new authority.
Ding, ding, ding.
So, and I want this to go along. These people are all working with each other in the government. They're all government people. These are not whistleblowers. They're CIA, DIA, NGA, and it's all intelligence people. So here is Semivan with Mellon. It gets increasingly difficult to deny that there are intelligent vehicles doing things that we ourselves cannot do in the atmosphere, Mellon said. I think these kinds of changes always take times, and I'm talking about a sea change in our worldview of our understanding of the universe and our place in it. USA Today, Christopher Mellon and Semivan having a conversation. Remember, Semivan is like top CIA, 25 years, CIA director. It doesn't get any higher than that unless you're the director. Now, the people involved, who launched the UFO op in the New York Times, the whole Elizondo business? Mellon, Elizondo, Semivan, look familiar? It's a CIA operation. It's very clear. Billionaires involved? Well, that's your Mellon connection right there. Elizondo, he was somebody that they try to use on this, but he got into fights and stuff with people in public, didn't work out as well. And Semivan, well, he's Mr. UFO contactee himself. I thought it was interesting. He had a conversation with another UFO abductee who's a CIA guy named John Ramirez. It was pretty wild because they had a conversation about how they were heading to the Edgar Cayce Foundation when one of them had a weird experience, whatever. So, these CIA people hanging out at the Edgar Cayce Foundation, what are they doing there? Are they still looking, trying to find information about the Hall of Records there? The CIA, you can't trust them for anything for the public. They'd never give anything to the public that was of value because their whole thing is about intelligence and keeping secrets. Who brought in that disconnect on the media side, on the UFO side, independent media? Who, would believe that? Knapp or Dolan or any of those people, do they honestly believe the CIA would give them the real truth? It's amazing to me. And it's too bad as well, because I think it took down a lot of researchers when they got tempted by this intelligence operation. But this is money, this is intelligence, this is connections. They can snap their fingers to get your TV show. Look at the terrible TTSA. What was the name of that show? Unexplained. No. Somebody will have it. It was basically a show where Elizondo, went from truck stop to truck stop, picking up food and stuff. I forget what the name of that show was, but I was like, this is terrible. Okay. So now, Jim Semivan, very importantly, when I asked Grusch about Semivan, I said, what about Semivan's role with you? He had to admit, yeah, well, he's in contact with me. Yeah. Well, he's a major CIA figure. Isn't that a concern? I mean, you're surrounded by CIA people. Shouldn't I be concerned? So now he was recently on Whitley Strieber, Semivan, and he said, you should take David Grusch and everything he says to the bank. I mean, he's not uttered a false word as far as I know. So, Semivan backs Grusch. That was bad. That was pretty bad. And it starts to give you that feeling of the CIA operation and the guy that they're maneuvering into place. Now, again, I want to say this about Grusch. I do feel like Grusch was a little bit different from an Elizondo or whatever, but he got groomed into what they're doing. And remember, he started, and he was in Huntsville, which is where the Soul Foundation is, that he would eventually become COO of. And he was a little bit different in that phase. This was him then, before they groomed him out to be this figure, to take on, to have Burchett and Luna and all those people come out and say, oh, we have this guy who's talking about interdimensionals. These are the people that groomed him. So, and there are pictures of him with Corbell and Jay Stratton from Radiance Technologies, the people who are redeveloping the UAP stuff. And, Stratton comes directly he's the head of the Navy. I mean, so these people are very well connected. They have their own operations going on, fine, but I'm not going to play along in the independent side with this phony operation. I'm not going to play along with Grusch. I'm not going to play along with Mellon or Semivan or any of these people. That's all bull. I'm telling you right now, their phony UFO operation is geared up for a UFO threat that is meant to develop UFO emergency powers for a continuity of government program to be able to call in. They already did a test run for it through NORAD last February. That's where things are going. I do sense competition between certain aspects inside the intelligence community And the COG people, I think, there's a lock there where they are in lockstep. But I sense that both of them have a great interest in the UFO file, and so there is friction there. I've picked up on that in the background. So here's my heroic quote of the night. Some people quote Longfellow, others Shakespeare or Emerson, but here's one from that courageous CIA employee from the top directorate, who's also an abductee himself, and he says, "The government doesn't own UAPs or the study or UAPs or the research. It belongs to everybody." That's right. A round of applause, everyone. CIA directorate champion. 3 decades at CIA. That damn government, they need to give us transparency. Oh, wait, he is the government. And he could have given transparency all those 3 decades at the CIA directorate, and he didn't. But now he wants that disclosure to come from that government. These are all people in the government. They all work for the government. This is a government soap opera. And until we get to that point, you're dealing with News Nation fluff, and you're dealing with incredibly, these are manipulated operations on a deep, deep level. And I've shown you some of those connections tonight. I'm going to open up more on this story that is going to be mind-blowing as we go along here, including things that I have in my, in my research that will open a great many things about the people that we're talking about. But what I want you to keep in mind for tonight is this: the same people that are setting up these soirees with their chosen whistleblower, the same whistleblower that I talked to, and who really, I have to say, it's a disappointing conversation in the grand scheme of things because of the amount that could have taken place there. And that he went from that conversation to jumping into this CIA billionaire thing, and with the whole shady people that were hosting it and all the rest of it. That's the direction. So sort of like the follow-up conversations that we were going to have, the spirit of this conversation that we were having has been violated in a sense. And that happens when you do any kind of journalism. It can happen, but you have to be aware of it, in fact. But I'm not here to, it's not Grusch I'm interested in. It's the people that are pulling Grusch's strings. And that has to be very important. But Grusch, I'm not going to cover for Grusch or anything like that. I'm going to put on the record the things that we talked about. And, that's the way it goes, because this whole spirit of our communication, by him tripping out, and basically disappearing, tells me a good deal. But one of the things that he gave that I think is really important in the middle of all this is that he let us know who the block was, at least for him in communicating. The person involved was Chris Mellon. There's no question about it. And I have more here, but with that, Miss Olivia, I am going to open it up to you and your questions. Take it away.
Okay, I'm going to start with the Soul Foundation. So Kate says Grusch failed to mention the Soul Foundation when DJ pressed him about Mellon.
Oh, yes.
So it didn't come up at all in the 3 hours that you spoke with him?
No, and this is interesting too. This is the kind of, there's a duplicity with what Grusch was saying. This is a problem. So you'll say, you develop a tone, and this happens to intelligence people. It's part of a personality thing. You forget who you actually are, and you're just operating in conversation with an operation. So you're always watching what you say. And it's hard. In real intelligence, you don't make mistakes like the one I referred to earlier, about 15 years versus 6 years about when he was researching UFOs and how he came to it. Because when you make mistakes like that in intelligence, somebody's life could be at stake. So you learn how to really be organized with your thinking. You don't make those types of mistakes in conversation. But there was all kinds of shifting in my conversation with him. The other thing that was problematic was, and this is an intelligence method, which is you kind of disconnect from your actual personality, and you're just the story that you've adopted into. You start to check all the boxes for the story that it is. But so I could ask him about something, and he was telling me, for example, that he felt at a certain point when he was bringing out information that he could be under, that he felt that people were doing things that were letting him know that he was being watched and things like that. And I asked him, do you think that could be people like Elizondo trying to make you paranoid into coming out, and saying I'm a whistleblower before Congress? Did you ever think that that's what was going on? And so then his initial reaction was, I think that's quite possible. But then a little bit later, he had to spin that all around and say like, I never talked to the guy, all this stuff, after already saying that we already know that they've been grooming him with Elizondo. And so when I came into different conversational points with him about Mellon, one of the classic things that's on the record is that Warner said, this is very interesting too. I think John Warner IV should be commended for putting this on the record. He said the Mellons have their own kind of Bilderberg version. And that Chris Mellon, he felt, had groomed, because Grusch was from Pittsburgh, he felt that Chris Mellon had groomed Grusch in that Mellon UFO, that Mellon Bilderberg up there in Pittsburgh. And it's kind of like a club meeting type thing. And, I was asking him point blank questions like, can you open that up? And he was like, well, I grew up on food stamps. And it's like, yeah, Mellon's a billionaire and you grew up on food stamps, but that doesn't mean he didn't pluck you out and, season you in this Mellon Bilderberg and then roll you out as a UFO whistleblower. Warner was very clear that he thought that was exactly what happened, especially with the fact that Grusch had mentioned Paul Mellon on Joe Rogan's show, who is Warner's grandfather, who was involved in all that UFO side of things. So you see how easily somebody like Grusch could clear this up, but he didn't. Instead of saying, no, that never happened, he used this food stamp thing. So there are a lot of problems with the way that Grusch communicates. Here's my suggestion. I know intelligence is a very deep topic and you need those abilities for the types of job that you used to do, but this is different. This is talking and supposedly sharing this deep UFO information that you got inside the government. You can't use those techniques and slide around. And then when I asked him, I said, well, a lot of people have also said in relation to this Dopser stuff that your, complaints, to the Inspector General, they actually cleared you to release all of the complaint. So we could all look at exactly what your complaint was. And he said, why should I share that? And, other people pick up on my intellectual property. So that doesn't sound like a UFO whistleblower to me. It sounds like Corey Goode, frankly, who was really big on holding on to his IP of 20 and back and all the rest of it. So those are just things that are on the fact and are, very easily provable from our discussion. My feeling is that this person was told, you're the one, we can put you through this. And they might even have told him in the sense that he thinks he's doing the right thing. But instead, it's all, surrounded by CIA, some of the worst people in CIA UFO ops. This is what I wrote on Twitter, which was an explosive tweet. I think people really resonated with this, and thousands of people viewed this. It had something like 80,000 views. Intel agent UFO whistleblower David Grusch, who has shamelessly been packing his private appearances with CIA and Wall Street bigwigs, according to him, told me in conversation that former DOD official Chris Mellon of the Mellon banking family would be angry with him and cause problems if he appeared on my show to answer tough questions. Grusch is the COO of Mellon, Nolan, and Gary Nolan's Soul Foundation, which Christopher Mellon's the director, remember. By the way, they've scrapped Grusch off the website. I thought that was interesting. Maybe Gary Nolan can come on the show and tell us why they did that.
When did they do that?
Well, it must have happened pretty recently because he was on there a little while ago. He's not there anymore. Okay. Would be angry with him and cause problems if he appeared on my show to answer tough questions. Grusch is the COO of Mellon and Nolan's Soul Foundation. What is Chris Mellon trying to hide? Literally. What is Chris Mellon, former DOD official, representative of the Mellon banking family and all that? What are you trying to hide? What are you trying to do in the UFO field? Why are you obscuring information from coming out in independent channels? And why are you basically saying there'll be blowback if you do something like that? Or creating that environment? Who died and left you UFO Cosa Nostra? what is Chris Mellon trying to hide? The control of the UFO field by the controllers of a CIA false UFO threat must be dealt with openly and honestly. Forget the jellyfish, forget TMZ, forget Corbell, get to the real thing. Expose, protect, and real IC manipulation now. So, I'm here basically, if these people were about transparency and wanting to get things out, you'd do it right on the show. You wouldn't sit in some billionaire's, love nest in Manhattan with a bunch of CIA people. That's a sick environment. You're not going to get transparency in that environment. Do you want to give those people any secrets about UFOs? They already know the UFO file. They're using people like Grusch as dangles in the public. And that's the nature of the sick situation that we're in on the UFO side. This is worse than TTSA, much worse. Yes.
Well, was TTSA a beta test for this?
No question. Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's funny. The anniversary of the TTSA and that article and all that just passed. There was nobody said anything because nobody wants to be associated with that. It was all lies. They were found to be lying, bobbling around in public. They said they were going to build an anti-gravity ship. They had investors and all the rest. What happened to all that?
What happened to the money?
That's a good question. I don't really know what they did. I remember reading an SEC report that said that they were $50 million in debt. That was 2 years after they were created. I don't know about their financial status or what they ended up doing with it. But now I know that they have like TTSA promo gear and they sell skateboards with alien faces on it and stuff. That's what that turned into. And Elizondo split off from that op. I think they wanted him to stop harassing people in public. So, it's very interesting to me because when I look at the situation, I say, why wasn't there a 6-year celebration by Leslie Kane and Elizondo online? You'd see like, yeah, we did it. 6 years ago, we put this out. None of that. Everybody ran for the hills. That's what you do when there's a really bad political campaign that just went down. Nobody wants to be associated with it. That's TTSA. To the Stars Academy. And I could tell you that people used to send me emails, like reams of emails about these guys are bringing the truth to the public. I mean, this is the nature of the problem. There's a naivete
Right.
when
Why
you get
are you
around.
being so mean?
Right. Asking a real question. That's being a mean one. Everyone, you're talking to the Dark Journalist X series. This is X series 164. We're going deep tonight, talking with you in the ideas room. And it's UFO Cosa Nostra. It has to be brought out. And we have a number of factors connecting into it. We already showed you some of the factors that had to do with spies, with Epstein and Clinton and Gates. I mean, how deep does this thing go? Remember, nothing that you hear about the UFO file on the surface from the media is ever true. There are just lines that you can follow, like the line around Kennedy and the secret space program, some of the stuff we brought out in Blue Enigma about Blue Gemini program and the two strands of that. And people like Lloyd Berkner, it's interesting. I was reading a book that was all about the setup for the Robertson panel, which Lloyd Berkner headed up. And that was the big UFO 1952 panel of CIA people to study this. And they had a young astrophysics professor in there named J. Allen Hynek, who was very open-minded to everything. And they would sit in this room and he described it. Some of the weird things that they would do, they would come right up to his face and say, see that UFO on the film? That's a bird. Or, they would kind of feed into this weird aggression thing. So on one hand, they're being open and transparent by having this astrophysics guy in there. And on the other hand, they're coming up to him and telling him what he's seeing. And he said, we'd be in these cold rooms that were like theater rooms, watch these films of UFOs. And they were very clearly not birds, according to Hynek. But people like Berkner and people like Alvarez and other people that were on the Robertson panel would be coming up and doing this weird, almost intimidation tactic to Hynek. So when Hynek gets out of there, he's like, what was that about? But he remembered it enough to keep it in his journal. So we have to remember that what's being held back in the UFO file, and that's the kind of open secret side of it. Hynek could see with his eyes. He was looking at some craft and they were telling him it's a bird, It's an anomaly. Like, shut up. So, there's a kind of a living hypnosis around the thing. And you find that in all the different pieces around it. It's funny that this story with the Russian spy Anna Chapman took place in 2010 because there was a huge UFO sighting over New York City on October 13th, 2010. And it was predicted by a NORAD officer. And I did speak to all the people who were involved in it, who had predicted it, because the whole thing had been predicted the summer before. So, when you're getting into the UFO file, I guess the point that I want to make is the dot connecting is crucial. No one's going to hand it to you, and it's not like you can have some fantasy about it. But if you can put solid details together, for example, when I found things on the record like President Kennedy and the fact that in 1958, he had sent a letter to an Air Force, a person in a particular Air Force department asking why they were hiding things around the UFO file. And the guy sends back a letter that's still in the archives at the JFK library that says, and this is Kennedy as a senator. And he's saying, listen, Senator, we're not doing anything to hide. I don't know what you're talking about. And like, we've been very transparent. We've had Blue Book, like basically shut up and sit down. So, these are the dots to connect. What is Kennedy as a senator doing asking for UFO information? Why did X Protect feel the need to eliminate Kennedy? Why the static with Dulles, who's the CIA director, and Kennedy, to the point where Kennedy fires him, and then Dulles ends up as the director of the Warren Commission on the intelligence side, trying to keep all the intelligence links to his death out of the Warren Commission. Answering and getting to the bottom of those questions is important. The other thing I want to point out in relation to the Kennedys, since we're talking about Cosa Nostra, is I think we need to adopt the attitude with people like Mellon that Bobby Kennedy and Jack Kennedy were adopting towards Hoffa, which is, there were all these things and these threats that Hoffa was trying to relay out there to block these witnesses from coming forward to talk before the panel. And one of the witnesses said, Hoffa said, don't worry, we're going to break that SOB's back. And so then when he doesn't realize he's being taped and he sits back down and Kennedy says, whose back are you going to break, Mr. Hoffa? And this is the famous moment on the Kennedy side. They were looking at Hoffa and saying, exactly whose back are you going to break? So my point,
figure of speech,
figure of speech. And my point for Mellon is, who UFO whistleblowers back are you going to break? Why are you trying to shut people up, Mellon? What is it? What's going on here? What the hell are you doing? And really, let's have an answer, real transparent answer. And, you can picture the kind of things that people would say like, oh, it's paranoid ranting. It didn't sound paranoid ranting to me when your Air Force NGA major said to me that he thought Chris Mellon would be very upset if he went on my show. I'll tell you another weird thing. He also said Jake Sullivan would be upset. How the hell does Jake Sullivan even know about the Dark Journalist show? So, and of course, he's a national security advisor for the Biden administration. What's going on here? And how do you get out of this phony function of Congress being like, we're going to have that whistleblower talk and all the rest of it? If Mellon is just pulling his strings, then Burchett and Anna Luna are pulling our strings. Let's get real. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist show. This is X Series 164. It's UFO Cosa Nostra. Okay, the covert CIA takeover of the UFO file. We're going to take a few more questions. I got a few more things to put on the record, and we'll go about another 30 minutes here. What do you got?
All right, you mentioned Luna. So Patty M. Wilhelm says, Luna's from Miami. Not surprised she came out with that. Lots of strange things come from Florida, and it's not aliens. And Wynn says, what does DJ think of the supposed alien sighting in Miami promoted on TikTok, etc.?
Oh, that's true. Well, look, we did touch on the Miami thing last week. I will say this about Luna, and it's an interesting point, which is that when she was running for office, her opponent was on tape trying to get a hitman to bump her off. And then this guy fled for the Philippines. It's one of the weirdest stories. But also, before she was a congressperson, she was like a Wonder Woman influencer on Instagram. And she didn't really seem to have any background for Congress. And then she's a big a Trump supporter in Congress. And so it's always interesting to see like, the kind of Podesta types getting behind Luna because, they're dyed-in-the-wool hardcore Democrats. So there's something interesting about that, but it could be, and I know that she worked for the Air Force, just like this lawyer worked for the Air Force for 6 years. The lawyer who set up the soiree and was Anna Chapman's boyfriend when she got grabbed and deported back to Russia. It could very well be that there's something that Luna was aware of, or they knew that she was going to be involved in this UAP rollout. And they literally had a candidate there that was either trying to intimidate her with this information or going to bump her off. So, I mean, that's how weird that case got. And if you look at it, there's a series of articles, the Orlando Sentinel, Miami Herald, all these different news outlets have that story that took place. And it all happened, I think, in 2018. And we covered it on this show. So, there is something interesting about Luna. And, maybe they knew she was involved with this thing. But Luna Burchett, maybe they knew they were going to roll out this technology through Congress people in Florida. And they wanted their own version. They didn't want whatever this other one was, So no, it's not saying anything bad about Luna in particular. What I get from Luna and Burchett, the only thing that bothers me about them, Burchett being the congressman from Tennessee who does all the press conferences, it seems, for all the UAP hearings. It's like this guy can't help but being in the middle, of the UFO thing. And I often ask when it comes to these people, what is it? Why suddenly are you all into the UFO file in Congress?
I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but if you are part of the insider group, you're going to have tips for insider trading.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Before anybody else.
Oh, yeah. There's a guy running, Ruben Galejo. This is very interesting because he has dual identities as well. And Galejo is running for senator. He's a congressman in Arizona, and he's running for senator. And, there's a real big problem there because you have Senator Sinema, who's gone independent away from the Democrats. And then you have this guy running to be the chief Democrat. And then you have Kari Lake. So what's interesting to me is that whole race is going to be pretty wild because he keeps bringing up the UAP thing and how we need transparency on that UAP from that government. But I wonder, why is Galejo interested in that at all? Now, his ex-wife was the mayor of Phoenix, which had the massive Phoenix Lights thing. But I found him interesting. When I looked into him, all that I found was he was over here at Harvard and that his specialty was psychological operations. So you find these people around the UFO thing, and what you want from them is straight answers. It's like, okay, you have a big background. This is what I would say to Galejo. You have a major background. You changed your name and identity from when you left Harvard. That was kind of interesting, but all right. And then you have this big background in psychological operations, and then you talk about the UFO file, and you need that government to give us transparency, and you're in the Hill demanding this, What is that? Why are you so interested in the UFO file? I mean, I can tell you why I am. How did you get into it? And why is it such a major policy item for you all of a sudden? My suspicion is at those gatherings in the back rooms around Congress, they're saying the UFO wave stuff is coming. They're going to roll it out, get on top of it. It's going to be a huge industry thing. It's like the railroad, in the 1800s, like get on this. And that's why you have all these people suddenly, talking about interdimensional entities, and sometimes very like corrupt. They roll out these corrupt Democrat politicians and they start, Representative Carson did this. They had him on Ancient Aliens of all things. And this guy, is as crooked as the day is long. And he comes out, but he's just in the political sphere, it's the nature of the ball game that he's in. I'm not specifying him as a particular kind of, he's just not a guy you would think accused of being honest. And he comes out and he's like, either it's extra dimensional or extraterrestrial. Stay tuned. This is what's happening to the UFO file. These, opportunist politicians, they're going to be your, teachers around the UFO issue. I mean, get real. The UFO field, we have the information, we have the thought leaders involved. We've lost a lot of them through the CIA op. The UFO field never was very deep, I'll be honest. But the information is important. The deep state researchers were always 10 times more efficient, understood the government better. The UFO researchers, there were some great ones. John Keel, Jim Mars, Stanton Friedman, those are Hall of Famers. But the other guys, all lost their way, shall we say. They got wrapped up in the TTSA thing. When that got dumped, they were promised hey, like CIA whistleblowers around the corner, that'll keep you going. We'll make sure you're in on the in crowd, And I couldn't believe the amount of people went down, but I think that must be like the medical community when the COVID thing hit. Some of these people had stars in their eyes, and their honest colleagues were like, what are you doing? So you had the COVID op there. The UFO threat op will make the COVID op look like kindergarten. So it's a major thing that's building up in the background, and we all need to be aware of it. Before I go any further, I want to remind you, by the way, to go to darkjournalist.com, sign up for our newsletter. That keeps us in touch, and through all the censorship that we're seeing, which is remarkable. But we have incredible shows that are coming up for you, interviews that are going to blow your mind, documentaries, live events, things that you don't want to miss. Stand up and be counted. Make sure you're on that newsletter list. It literally takes 20 seconds, and it's free. While you're there, if you want to support the show, you can become a subscriber. We've made it very affordable to get behind us for bonus content, advanced warning of events or documentaries or other wonderful things that we have coming up for you, shows that you'll get first, things of that nature. It's all there at darkjournalist.com waiting for you, and we appreciate your support. Okay, Miss Olivia, you're up.
That's a great question. Kontiki Man, does the info DJ has gathered give any insight in the corporate UFO groups in Russia after the fall of the USSR?
Yeah, this is a really good question. There were a lot of takeovers of industry by the United States. But I feel like because the Russians were so advanced on the UFO file side, and their setup was a little bit different than what America had done with it. America in the 50s, they tried to pull the UFO file away during the Eisenhower administration. So it would be operated by this shadowy group operating between the aerospace side and the intelligence side. And they were able to have people and groups like Lockheed Martin, Defense Contractors, fill that void. So the idea was you'll never be able to really press the government for its secret on that, because it's not a state secret, it's a corporate secret, and that's private under American law. In Russia, it was different. And there's a very famous story about a Russian leader in the early 80s, not Gorbachev. I think it's Khrushchev, who orders, because of all these strange incidents happening around the nuclear facilities and UFOs, who orders all pilots to submit their reports to a central body relating to the UFO file. And so they create the biggest and the most open inside their ranks reporting operation far beyond anything in other countries. They already were very advanced on the space side. And it's funny when you read Gordon Cooper, he's talking about how the Russians are really ahead of us on a number of things. But obviously, even to him, it's amazing that we could jump ahead so far to get with the Apollo missions when they couldn't. So that secret tech obviously was working on our side. On their side, there were problems with it. As a matter of fact, before the official moon landing dates in July of '69, the Russians in May were going to beat us there. But guess what? Their stuff blew up before it got off the runway. So there was a lot of sabotage involved on that. What I can say is the Russians are just as advanced, if not more, on the UFO file side. That seems to be basically the understanding. Maybe we have an edge because we have that paperclip edge going in. Of course, they had their own German scientists. It's not like we just got Nazis and that's it. No, they had tons of them. But it could be that we had the most important. in any case, the spoils of war worked like that. But make no mistake that not only do the Russians hold cards in relation to the UFO file, but they hold cards in relation to the Kennedy assassination. They have their own intel about what happened on that. 9/11, their satellites saw exactly what was going down. Did they see a plane go into the Pentagon? No. So the Russians, a lot of the blackmail game that goes on there between the two countries, I see them more and more putting things out and saying, you know what? There were UFOs that were flying over Moscow and we shot them down, using the term UFOs. So they, on a certain level, I think the Russians are saying, do you want to, do you want to get into this? If you keep propping up Ukraine to bomb our main city here, we might have to start talking about your UFOs. So there's a lot of that. And all I can say is we're right in the middle of that war. And I don't mean the Ukraine-Russia war either. I mean the UFO file wars. Yes.
Joseph, just wanted to correct you. It's Andropov.
Yes, Yuri Andropov. Thank you. I know that there was a succession of Russian leaders who died. And it was interesting. It's like they would put up they had their own Biden program at that point. And they were like, put up the most brain dead, and the oldest guy that we have who can't do anything and make him the figurehead so we can control things from the parliament in the back. And that's exactly the model that they used for the Biden administration. It was amazing because they had Biden out there stumbling around recently, and Jill Biden was saying, democracy's at stake if Joe doesn't get back in. And, you have Joe wandering around in the back. Obviously, the group that is running Biden, and this is my terrible criticism for the Bobby Kennedy campaign, which is an incredible, flaccid, ineffective position when it comes to going after the Biden administration. And that campaign, the reason that it doesn't have the fire that it should, because they have great ideas and he's a great candidate, is they've instructed him to hold back on going after Biden. A huge mistake, maybe a perilous mistake for that campaign completely, because Biden is the person with the job of president, and what they've had Bobby doing is going after Trump, which is a disaster. It's a terrible idea. Trump doesn't have the job. Your opponent, in fact, both of you are after the president's job. You should both be going after the president. And, so for them to just have him sniping at Trump, I think is pathetic. That campaign, when it went independent and Kucinich left, that's when it developed problems. And
Immediately.
Yeah. So Fox took over, his daughter-in-law. She has no campaign experience. And, 15 years ago, she worked in the CIA. My thing with that is, look, even whatever it is, her lack of experience and her lack of the ability to make this a national campaign is going to make just the campaign a distraction. And there was somebody in the super PAC for Robert F. Kennedy who said, we only need 15 electoral votes to win. No, the only thing 15 electoral votes will do is to deprive the other two of a 270 majority. It'll go into Congress, and the never Trumpers, along with the Democrats, will vote Joe Biden in. So I don't know why they're doing this weird loop about what they need to win. What you would need to win is 270 electoral votes. That's the only way President Kennedy could get in. So if Bobby Kennedy wants to do that, I don't know, are they feeding him this stuff? Because it doesn't make any sense for him to be saying it. And he's been saying it a lot. It doesn't work that way. You don't win with 34% of the vote. No way. You have got to get 270 electoral votes. And we know Texas, California, New York, Illinois, those are all gone right away. All you have to do, you have the states that you can work with in the middle, the Rust Belt states, some of the Southwest states, and all the rest. You have to put together some coalition for 270. And, there's a lot of problems. There could be a whole Camelot thing there, but not unless you have to take down the Biden administration. I don't know. It's the first rule in politics. You have to take down your opponent. And for them to do soft gloves and not, once in a while.
Biden is not his opponent.
That's it.
That is the sneaky truth.
Yeah. And that, what you're suggesting there is that really this is a setup for some 2028 thing and not.
No, I think he's running for a position in the next administration.
Yes,
That's what he
right.
wants.
The next Democrat administration.
Mhm.
Probably the thing is with Bobby, you know, he's a great spokesman for different issues and can be an incredible champion of truth, and his campaign can be a great thing. As it stands, it's softballs for Biden. You know, instead of saying, well, they need a common sense thing at the border, how about the country's being destroyed and overrun because they opened up the border and they're letting in terrorists and everybody else. And unless you seal that border, you won't have a country. So therefore, Biden is destroying the country. Therefore, Biden is your enemy. And the Biden
You're
regime,
thinking too logically.
the Biden regime needs to be taken down. You know, that's what you have to do in order to save America. That should be, you know, if I were Bobby 2024, I'd say save America, get rid of the Biden regime. You know, instead it's, you know, let's have Bobby talk about his 12-step. You know, I don't know who's running the campaign. Look, I'll tell you this. A lot of people have a very he has an interesting life story. I'd like to hear it. You know, I have an interesting life story back there. Someday I'll tell it myself. Those things are great. But right now, with people flooding across the border and Biden destroying the country, I think that you need to talk about the issues and forget about the candidate for a while. You know, we'll catch up on his wonderful journey in nature. But, you know, how about going after Stepford Biden and the insane group that's running him and trying to cause World War III with Russia and moving us into, you know, military postures in the Middle East and, you know, trying to develop domestic terrorism bills to throw everybody in prison who's against them. You know, this is, I mean, it's an insane situation. That's what I would do in the Bobby campaign. And, you know, I've been hoping they would do a lot better with the issues. And, you know, he has the ability to do it. He has the know-how and the smarts, but the campaign is a big letdown. Yes.
Okay.
What do
Back
you
to
got?
the topic. Becca Truly Stewart says, looked up Dr. Nolan on the Soul Foundation website, and he's done lots of research on Ebola and Zika, as
Oh,
well as
boy.
ovarian cancer.
Yeah.
Kat Gray says, does DJ think the WHO's recent warning of disease X is tied in with steganography?
Oh, yeah.
And Mr. Neutron says, word is Epstein is on tape talking about human hybrids and human DNA experiments mixed with animal DNA. And these operations were created on a different island, just like the island of Dr. Moreau.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a few things mixed in with this, which is the idea of the type of genetic research that they want to do and the levels that they're already at with it. This is another area of transparency that we're so far behind in from a public point of view. And, you know, I'm sure just like in Atlantean times, they're crossing these human chimerical, you know, cyborgs, basically, that Edgar Casey talked about, the automatons. And here we are back into this Atlantean kind of mindset where we're planning on doing that. And they've been developing, you know, all these capabilities for these robots to do different things. And now they want to synthesize, you know, the human embryos with the machine and all the rest of it. That's, you know, that's why we have this kind of psychopathy in the Davos crowd, because people like Harari are walking around thinking that they're going to have this world and that they're guaranteed and that, you know, they're behind this ivory tower and they can't be brought down. So there's a real struggle there with the money, power, and the scientific dictatorship of the world. And we saw it during COVID. There's no question about it. You know, it was interesting because they had Fauci before Congress recently. He said, yeah, you know, like the social distance thing was basically made up. That whole 6-foot thing, they made it up, you know, the mask, you know, and all the rest. So we know this is how information comes out over time. But what it tells you is the levels and the data mining that they were doing during that operation for the thing that they are planning, including the fact that they want to make and have groups like the WHO have the ability over a sovereign country to say, oh, well, we have this health emergency, so your constitution goes out the window. They're trying to sign us on to these things as a backdoor. And it's funny because for years people thought, well, the UN, you know, that's how they'll do it. They'll open us up to the UN troops and all the rest of it. What they discovered was that it was easier to do through health treaties and things of this nature. So I do hear that in terms of the intense migrant caravans that are set up to really overwhelm the country, that they're being organized by the UN, and that the people come in and they have these UN cards and all the rest of it. And it's tough too, because, you're talking about how they're exploiting humans, other human beings from different situations, people from very dire circumstances in Central Asia, in the Middle East, and they're rolling them into this thing. And you can see what's happening. The problem is because with the setup of this country, it'll be overwhelmed. And if you look at those charts of who's coming in, it's unsustainable. And they're already throwing kids out of schoolrooms, as we know, to make room for the migrants and stuff. So it's completely unsustainable. And that's where they're going, though. And think about the groups that are behind that type of thinking. When they get around the alien idea, they love it. It opens up all kinds of doors for what they can do. And in the back there is this whole thing about, this whole idea of an emergency threat. Remember the continuity of government people. They've been trained to think of the world as surviving in these underground bunkers and then coming up when the world, they're sort of seeding a new world. It's like Adam and Eve, they seed the new world. That's the mentality that those people have. So when we see like General Van Herk and the Northcom commander coming up there, this is the mentality that he's been trained in. And so the fact that on one hand, as a society, we don't know anything about what's going on underground with the continuity of government people because it's outside of any kind of oversight because it's so secret. So the COG people on one hand are a huge problem. The space aspect and the secret space program aspect, well, they're using the same rules that the continuity of government program are using for secrecy to avoid oversight. JP Morgan recently went on the record and said, what? Well, we're going to do all our transactions as far as, digital transactions in space. So the whole thing that Bitcoin is set up to do to get us used to this whole digital transaction so that, they can come out with a CBDC and have JP Morgan, using blockchain in space. And by the way, you're outside of the normal laws of the United States when you're in space. So the culture has to catch up. It's a very interesting precipice point that we're at, but there are sources of information coming forward. And certainly the stuff that we're presenting on this program, I hope helps us get there. It's interestingly enough, the UFO file can get us in because the UFO file is the wall of secrecy that the geopolitical system is built around. In other words, they develop the layers of secrecy to that level because of the UFO file. So when you're peering into that, you're rocking the deep state, as it were. Rock the deep state. Go ahead.
Brenda Fisher.
That's like rocking Christmas.
Will the staged alien invasion usher in Disease X? And Bill says the fake alien invasion to delay election?
They're looking at everything in terms of the election because they know how it's going to go. At this point, Trump would win pretty much in a landslide if it were a fair election. There's no doubt about that. If you look at polls, even if you are, somebody who's on one side or another, the polls are very obvious because the Biden administration, because of their destruction of the country through their economic policy and the lack of security at the border, everyone is starting, the word is getting across. The problem is that they have tools, and the tools generally have to do with emergency powers. And that's the road that they're leading down. So you could say, well, they might have a Disease X emergency. But I'm telling you, they'll use the X steganography. This is part of the whole X and Elon Musk thing. It was funny because Elon Musk came out with this tweet and he was like, X is where you'll find the truth. I was like, you're just a social media company, I mean, you're not about truth at all. Or else you talk about UFOs, SpaceX owner. He said, oh no, there's no aliens, there's no UFOs.
Has he actually said that?
Oh yeah. And he's like, I'm in a position to know, I would know. Well, no, DARPA wouldn't let you say anything if you did know. So come on. And I don't like the way that all the conservatives are kissing up to Elon too. It's, be very, very, very stoic and studied when it comes to individuals like him who are so supported by that defense structure. And he can't move a muscle without the United States military. Let's get real about that. But he put out this big thing like the truth is here, at X. And I put right underneath it in a tweet, I put, no, it's on the X series. And by the way, we were doing this before you called the thing X. So we were here first. But, this is the nature of the thing. So one of the reasons that I thought X steganography was so fascinating is I knew that inside they used the term to move the technology through government agencies. So that meant there had to be an inside crew who felt themselves to be kind of super special operating. Well, we know where the X technology is. We know how to read this stuff. So you might say either through research or through hearing something or whatever, but I tripped into it. And I found that you could track it. And so when I came forward with the X series in 2018, none of this, you weren't seeing the X flooding you like you're seeing it flood you. The X is all signaling. Now, remember, steganography is about one group saying, I know this and I know that, and they're communicating with each other. But in the middle are people who it's supposed to be something that's very open and ordinary. So steganography isn't an obvious hidden, it's not a crypto, code. It is something that's operating ordinarily in plain sight. That's the whole point of steganography. And I think all of the information around Trithemius and how he understood steganography and how he got it rolling out of those monasteries so he could communicate these kind of magical rites is very interesting, because he said, well, steganography, the Greeks called it a page within a page. So you're looking at one thing and you think you're seeing what you're seeing, and then there's something else behind it. It's almost like the subliminal that somebody else can understand. So X and Disease X, the Everything app, all of this stuff, the steganography means they have the technology, and this is like they're coming out with it. They're coming open, and you'd like to think that, hey, it would be great. Civilization could move forward. The culture could move forward. Advanced technology, everything would be great. But unfortunately, all the signs are that at the top, all they want to do is consolidate power and depopulate and behave in a criminal fashion. So this is the nature of the situation we're in. Yes, Miss Olivia.
Okay. Mike Rotunda says the whole UFO community is controlled by the CIA. They're running that show and people just don't get it. They're hijacking the narrative. That's what they're doing. Chris Lothian says, is the UAP op an exclusively CIA operation, or do they coordinate with other intelligence agencies, both in the US and abroad? And on that note, Rehoboth Farm says, I think that on one level, there's an actual tension between countries, but on a higher level, they're all working together towards goals we don't understand. Just saying.
Yeah, those are really all lined up well. One thing that catches me in there is countries coordinating with each other. There's a certain rule about it. Remember, one of the problems with what President Kennedy was trying to do was he said, look, I want to share this UFO file with the Russians, because if they have incidents over the nuclear facilities, they need to know it's not us. And there were a number of them. But the people in the national security state saw Kennedy's openness around this and the joint moon mission, which I found out was a joint moon Mars mission, which is something we're going to talk about in an episode that's coming up. That whole idea about going into space with the Russians, making it a war-free zone, is anathema to the people who control war here on the planet. And but there are rules that are set up in relation to the UFO file. Interestingly enough, the NORAD officer I mentioned earlier and the Defense Secretary of Canada, Paul Hellyer, told me, and he passed away, but they're both passed away, unfortunately. But they put on the record with me that the Defense Department in Canada and the Defense Department in America coordinate with each other around the UFO file if there's a sighting or something, and that they don't involve the political authorities. So they're not going to go to the president with that and say, oh, hey, there's a UFO buzzing your nuclear silos in New Hampshire, So it's interesting to me that they have this different system of communication. That we know for sure. In terms of like Russia or China, I think that there's a UFO espionage that I call espionage that takes place that is not talked about and explains a good deal of things. And as a matter of fact, I think that there was an element of UFO espionage in the Anna Chapman story. And that's why it's very interesting that all this showed up with Grusch and, the soiree by the lawyer that was her boyfriend, because she has aerospace written all over. So that process goes on, and it's kept out of the headlines because they don't want you to talk at all about the real UFO file. It is completely off. And this is an important thing for us to understand. You're not going to get any kind of transparency. You'll get the show that they want you to have and the aliens that they want you to believe in, and the UFO threat that will guarantee them more power. That's what they're building up. And they think that they can fool, stupid Americans or stupid Russians or stupid British people or stupid French people or whatever. And the problem is that as soon as people understand and can separate the idea of the operation from what's actually taking place, as soon as they understand so-and-so is not a whistleblower, they're a government operative, then it starts to click. It takes a while. I've seen it on Twitter, but it does happen. And if they watch this show, or if they are in the ideas room, these are the types of conversations I think that they don't want people to have, because it really goes right to the guts of the UFO false CIA disclosure and the false threat that comes on with that. The other thing is all the technology that they can dip back in. Where's that story? Look, they've hidden this stuff for at least 80 years, probably centuries, but they've hidden this stuff for a long time. How do you roll it out? You need a story. The story is, now we have Semivan going on the record and saying, I know where the secret bunkers are, good old top CIA people. So those are the people that, we're not going to be inclined to believe if you are looking at the real topic. Now, even if you go into John Keel's story, you're going to find the whole key to the UFO enigma, in my opinion. It has to do, and the secrecy wall that surrounds it, it has to do with what I call apotheum. That's why I make it a central point, and why when we do this broadcast on February 25th, it's going to center on apotheum. And the apotheum creates a reality distortion field. Originally, this episode was going to be about apotheum, in fact, but with all the Grusch stuff, it was too good of an opportunity to present this, and Chapman and all the rest. But the apotheum stuff, you're going to find them grappling with the reality distortion that the UFO file creates. So a very simple example, a UFO shows up and, a nuclear base, their missiles shut off. People see it and they experience missing time, or they find themselves, back in their car a couple hours later and their clothes are weird. So it upsets the time frame network. It upsets things energetically. It upsets, when a craft lands, nothing will ever grow there again. It upsets electrical fields. So a number of things, all the normal things that happen in our reality from a physics point of view, it introduces a reality distortion. And so those physics kick in, whatever that is. And so that's the apotheum effect. This happens when you're dealing with UFOs. That's why they've had problems even with tracking them. Things disappear, or they show up here without showing any movement. So you have that aspect, but the other problem that you have with it is when they've used it, if you go back into the Aztec UFO story, it's very interesting, because if you dig deep, you'll find out that the people who worked on that crashed saucer, when the scientists would go in, they realized, they get sick, they pass out. Some of them died. So what they realized was there was a time limit. You could go in there for a half hour and work on the stuff, and you have to come out. So there are all sorts of strange rules of that nature that kick in when you're dealing with the UFO file. the apotheum aspect also exists inside of things like the Tesla technology and the things that were hidden by the mystery schools. They're all wrapped up in that UFO file. They have the same effect. It's not, the Tesla stuff isn't necessarily alien stuff. You don't even have to think of UFOs as alien necessarily. But whatever it is that those things are, it's this effect. They've found it. It happens. They don't know how to control it. They don't know how to aim it exactly. But they've learned a great deal about their own advances in technology that they've kept from the public view, but also from the things they've discovered by studying these things. So that is their great secret. Remember, physicist Sarah Barker said, this stuff is a higher level of secrecy than the atomic bomb. So our whole nuclear program is secondary. When you think about that, then things start to make sense. I want to make one other comment, which is I got a lot of great comments on the last episode we did on the Valerie UFO file, Gordon Cooper being right in the middle of that. But Gordon Cooper, who worked in space, operated in space, believed in UFOs completely. And, he saw them. So he knows that it was a real thing. He also understood that there was a lot of secrecy in relation to this. And one of the things he put on the record is he felt, probably with Valerie's influence, that the Tesla ELF, the extra low frequency developments, that is something that another country stole. And so that we had it, and of course it was John Trump who went in to study Tesla's work when he died. When you put that kind of information together, you're looking at a very interesting piece, because Cooper, in his own book, not Dark Journalist or Dr. Farrell or anybody, Gordon Cooper, the astronaut, he said that SDI was set up as a way, had nothing to do with nuclear missiles. It was set up as a way to deflect from this, what I would call apotheum technology that the Soviets had developed by stealing aspects of the Tesla development, that we had our own version of this, but both have the ability to basically create this apotheum effect as the Atlanteans did. And what's interesting to me is that SDI at that point, the way that they're putting it together, that attracts the UFO attention. We have a huge wave around that. And then you have Reagan thinking, I'm going to have to go public with this, and talking before the UN. And as we know, talking with Gorbachev in private in Reykjavik and saying, if these UFOs attack us, will you help us? So obviously we attracted somebody's attention with SDI. And as people say, we've attracted their attention with the atomic bomb. Apparently SDI was another flare from the primitives on planet Earth. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. This is X Series 164, and going deep into UFO Cosa Nostra. This is the Central Intelligence Agency invasion, covert invasion of the UFO file through whistleblowers and billionaires and CIA people. We're going to take a few more of your questions, and then we're going to let you go this evening and ponder some of these results. And we're going to do a follow-up on all this as well. There's more info to come out, and I'm going to find my best way to present some of the things that I've been able to pick up on in relation to all this. And there's more to come. Yes.
Okay, Robert Ayala. Planetary government, quote, "We're on the real issues. They all work together, and the rest is all a show." Kontiki Man, "They all seem to play pretty nice in the Antarctic despite all the shenanigans over here." And Nicole, any idea who runs the tippy top? Belial Group, globalist Satanists, Freemasons, with so many secret societies, who's the top coordinator?
Well, this is very interesting. You have to understand Belial. And it's very interesting because there are a lot of interpretations of Belial if you look into it. But basically, Casey used this as a term. He called the group the Sons of Belial, and they operated in Atlantis. And it seems like a lot of the hot zone activity that, there's normal activity for looking for ruins, for example, but this kind of weird geopolitical hiding, chess game thing that's been going on with ruins there in the Bahamas, Cuba area, relates directly to the cult that's interested in Belial. The original Belial cult were able to steal from the Amelius group the ability of their technology. This is the story that comes to us through the Casey readings. You can find waves of this in Steiner's work also. But in Casey's understanding of the Atlanteans, they had advanced technology through the Two-Eye Stone, sometimes called the Firestone. And the Two-Eye Stone in Casey's work is one of the most unexplored and most fascinating pieces. I've explored it on this program. But what the Two-Eye Stone had the ability to do was run an entire planet with an endless energy source. It sounds to me like the Atlanteans had their own space program as well. And that's another kind of deep play in all this. So Casey was giving us that information. The mystery schools were laying down this information, kind of understanding that as a culture and as a race of people, we were going to encounter this moment of memory by achieving this level of technology again. And they wanted us to have that memory. And that's why that information is there. The Two-Eye Stone existed at a certain point. So the Belial group pirated the Two-Eye Stone and used it for physical destruction or physical domination. And they operated in the central continent of Atlantis, the central continent, because of the wars between the Amelius group, who used the same technology for spiritual purposes. They attuned their people through the technology and could talk to the saintly realms. This is the Casey story. There's 900 readings on the Atlanteans in Casey's work. So when you get into this part, you start to understand that the Belial thing is like an ongoing soul group attachment, just like the harmonic thing that Steiner refers to. It's something that's inherent in humanity. So this goes into almost like a cosmological type conversation. But what you'd expect from me on the X series, no big surprise. But what I would say is this: Belial is the kind of might is right. It's like the World Economic Forum. It is, they want to just exercise their powers as gods to be gods. And you can see them in their eyes. There's some researcher, I think it was Naomi Wolf, who said, look at all the people, who are around this centralization thing on the medical side, and like start to look, their eyes do look. And I don't, some people can have all kinds of different looking eyes. I don't try to stigmatize anybody for any type of look that they have, but it is interesting because they do seem like something is gone. They're sort of lit into this whole separate mindset. They're receiving their instructions from some other place. They've become into the cult. And it's interesting because I think it's been recognized that a lot of the woke stuff is a cult and all the rest, and people are starting to throw it off. And what's happening is in all those horrible mainstream media shows, like MSNBC is calling urban America a cult, and like they want to have Trump again. That cult, the cult of not urban America, but rural America. Excuse me.
Flyover country.
Flyover country. So they're very afraid of the people who are, not programmed by them on the coasts. So this is the nature of the political situation. As we come into 2024, that resonance of the Belial idea, what you see shows up. If you can look for it, it shows up in like the stories of Epstein. It shows up, why is there an Atlantis factor at all in the Epstein story? Think about it. There are reasons for that. We've tried to put as many of them out there as we can, but there's a lot more coming, and when you look at, there's a lot of work now to awaken you on these things. And I've pointed it out before with some of the great guests and friends of the program here, like Gigi Young, Joseph Farrell's work. I mean, there's an incredible wave here if we can use it. There's a wave of information. And so if we're not overwhelmed with, TMZ, UFO expertise, and revelations by corrupt Congress people, then I think we might have a really interesting chance of changing the whole paradigm here. All right, Miss Olivia, you're up.
Okay, Joseph Tugas. Aquino's book Mind War talks about using ELF for mental manipulation. And Libby Lou says, how can we trust anything or anyone with so many mind control tools at play? Blank slate / inserted memories?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you mentioned Aquino, because there's a factor in all this as well, which is there's a major secret society factor going on around the UFO file. There's no question about it. Mellon is involved with the secret society, make no mistake. And Warner tried to open us up to this idea of what it could be in our last interview. So maybe watch that and get a hint. But the role of the secret societies and their occult prowess is crucial for us to understand. So not as, sometimes it becomes almost a game of chasing Illuminati and different things. Like, I don't want anyone to become overly paranoid in that regard. So I'm not saying, think about it. I'm saying notice it. That would be, you can start to see those things. There are deep, deep roots of the occult around space, around aerial activity. Let's not forget, when they opened up Lindbergh's engine, they found a huge swastika in there. Well, he wasn't using it as a Nazi symbol, although we know that they enjoyed him. They invited him over as often as they could. But he understood, there was almost kind of a luck thing associated with it. But he talked a great deal about, being up there when he was doing his transatlantic flight and all these voices coming into his plane. And then we have the occult doctrine about spirits of the air. It's in the Bible too. And then we have the Casey quote about Armageddon being fought by the souls returning to and the souls leaving the earth, the prevention of souls who are as emissaries basically coming into earth. That's, he saw Armageddon as a huge aerial battle, in fact. So there's something about the air and space that relates dramatically to occult ritual, and it has a very, very deep esoteric core. So the more we understand, when you're dealing with the politics of the current period, many of the people that you're looking at are deep operators inside of occult programs, or they're the puppets of occult programs. So the more that we understand those things, the more immune you can say. That's real immunity. There you go. It's not a needle. It's an understanding. That's real immunity. And I think when it comes to occult, we're going to come on a whole different level, and it's going to open up dramatically about the types of things that the secret societies control. Remember, we have this little flash in 1920 of Steiner examining Helena Blavatsky's situation when she came into America and saying that the secret societies ruled 90% of the political process back then, and that they didn't know what to do with her, and that they used a constitutional piece in order to move against her. So this is what they decided that we can do. So the occult groups that were in America decided to boot occult Helena Blavatsky by using a constitutional amendment. Very, very interesting, because when he's talking in 1920, he said, well, that process is only gained. And now when you go into certain political meetings, you have to basically know the handshake or the move or whatever it happens to be. So these things run very deep, and we should be aware of them, not in a paranoid fashion, but and I've seen a lot of nonsense too. You have to be very careful about how people, say these things. But on a real level, there's incredible secret society activity. Miss Olivia, 2 more questions, and then I'll read something, and then we're done.
Okay, I'm going to combine these. Charlotte Knight, I often speculate about the release of high tech that some groups or secret societies have held these for millennia in secret and release on some sort of schedule. And Rehoboth Farm, while at an Intel corporation, I got a glimpse into how tech was released based on maximizing profits and not based on limits of technology. What can they really do? NDAs. To play devil's advocate, would it be a good thing if everyone had access to unlimited energy? Personally, I'm undecided. I don't know if humans are mature enough yet. I want to use that to ask you, you've studied consciousness, and what are we as humans that we don't understand what we are, that we're programmable, right? This is that the secret societies understand.
Yeah.
How understanding that, knowing that, acknowledging that in humility could make us more prepared for real disclosure and real empowerment.
Oh, there's no question. Well, on a deep level, humanity must be malleable. It must be, because if you're going to develop, you have to be, able to be shaped by powerful spiritual influences. So there's no question that we have the ability to be taken and developed spiritually, or taken and, sort of put over the coals and become kind of a Frankenstein version of what should be there. So the development seems to have, that's where the free will aspect comes in. And it does go very deep, because the people, it becomes very obvious in the era that we're in. People during World War II probably sensed this too. They had a nice light society before World War II. In the 1930s, they were recovering from the Depression, but they weren't having, V2s rain down on them. And they weren't dealing with Nazi swastikas overrunning every country, So all these incredible things that they needed to live through. And yet this is a supernatural event. There's no question. So then you have a relative peace after that. And then you come into this period of Kennedy preventing us from having basically a third world war and being a hero, but being eliminated. And then we get the whole kind of misshapen leadership from the West from Kennedy forward. And we realize we're in absolute twilight zone by the time you get to 2024. So it does bring us into a very practical reality around the election. It brings us into a practical reality around resources, and also in terms of the types of information that we take in and the types of leaders that we have. And it's becoming obvious across the board that the leaders that we have do not represent the advancement of the people on the ground, and that the leaders are so twisted through the technology because of what they've been able to hide and achieve in secret, that it's almost like we're not even the same species anymore. So they're morphing off into this thing, and they regard us as, totally separate form of life. They think that they're gods with the technology, and that they will merge with the technology. And at the heart of that is an occult understanding. So we certainly are covering that on this program, and we'll go deeper and deeper with it. But the key is that the mystery schools left a track for us, and that the track opens up any person, because everyone has a spiritual encoding. And so therefore that, that pattern can be awakened in any person. Yes.
So I'll tell you where I was going with this,
Yeah.
is that we are like receivers and amplifiers.
Yes.
And we are always sending out ripples, vibrations.
True.
And we are all very psychic with one another and very sensitive, and we are impacting one another globally, right? So if you could have humanity realize one thing, would it be our individual power of choice to what we take in, what we absorb, and what we reflect out? And what would Casey say? What would Gurdjieff say about that? The amplification of being a human.
Wow, that's really true. And some people are bigger amplifiers than others. We've seen that too. Well, there's no question. I like a fundamental that we can follow up with there is that thoughts are things. So I wondered about this with Casey, and I read a lot about what he was suggesting in relation to this. But if we actually understood it on a core level, there's a creation progress going on. Mind is the builder, right? So very often when you see this, these stories run across, or even the things that came out about Epstein, and you see how they kind of drilled in the salacious aspects. So that's all what people are thinking about, and they miss the kind of deeper things that are going on there. And in a way, it accomplishes a different purpose because it keeps people in that low state. And you can either be, operating in this very low frequency, and they can keep you into that, and so that you eventually just think that that's reality. But it has nothing to do with reality. This is the interesting thing. So thoughts are things. There's another thing about the period that we're in, which you can find in some mystery school literature. You can find it in anthroposophy, that the literal vibrations from thinking become more material faster in the period of speeding up that we're in. So this is almost an alchemical formula, but it would be more important now to control your thoughts than ever because the manifestation of your thoughts, and we have that technologically, and we're going to have more of it with holographs and all the rest of it. But it was interesting because I remember talking to someone who worked in technology, and they said, well, life would just be so great if we had a virtual reality place where anyone could go and commit any crime and do all this stuff, and it would never happen in real life. And I said, no, based on what I understand about thoughts being things, it would happen twice as much in real life if you had that, because you'd be creating the thought forms of those different things. So it doesn't work like that. The key is to eliminate that kind of thinking. And unfortunately, we have a kind of a glorification of very superficial things in culture, but certainly a glorification of violence. And so those are key things as a culture to overcome. There's an incredible celebration of war and violence in the current culture. What's interesting is there's a celebration also of, when we come into the UFO field and we're talking about these things, there's this weird celebration that we have this advanced technology, shut up, we're going to get to this advanced technology. This weird CIA whistleblower is going to make us bigger with more technology. So, people's kind of common sense in this field's slipping right through the back door. And I think it's important to have something around the UFO file, which is like the adults in the room, but not a phony, hey, UFOs are bringing us to a new place. That UFO understanding piece around the UFO file can fuel a broader understanding of the whole spectrum, because especially when it comes to politics, it's been a leader in the secrecy and advantage and the disconnect between the public on the ground and this other leadership group that goes on in its own way. So in a way, it's a major factor. It's a major temptation, the way that they've developed it. And they've developed it so much in secret that they've operated it on a criminal secrecy level, all the while saying, we have the technology, you don't deserve it. We know how to handle it. We're the responsible ones. And that worked maybe for them for a while in their own minds, but it doesn't hold true with any sense of reality. So my feeling on that is the understanding around the UFO file, there's a false thing around that too, that, it's the biggest story in history. And, all this, it's a game changer in a number of ways, but certainly, the biggest story, the biggest thing for all humanity would be understanding resurrection, right? Understanding psychic experience. To understand you have peers who have advanced technology wouldn't be the ultimate change, be a big change, but let's get real. So let's debunk that immediately. And I think there's a period, I think that we could embrace this idea of other beings. And I think that includes elementals and other things along that line. Interdimensionals, like Anna Paluna Luna says. And I think with that, Miss Olivia, we're going to wrap up tonight's show. I want to thank everyone for being here. And I'm going to read one quick quote. Before I do you want to just give us the super chats?
Sure. Okay.
Off you go.
So I'd like to thank Jen S., Bill, Les Scott, Andrew B., Harvardian, Bill Gometz, Christopher Lombardo, Tracy Klatke, Global Atlantis, Matt, Eurythmia's Fun, Erica Swenson Elliott, The Bikini Truther, Bo Krills, Sun Hero, Doreen Hewitt, Roosevelt Media News, Bella B., Amarillo Gunrunners, Robert Scott, and Christina Mystic. Thank you so much for your generous super chats.
Well, we really appreciate your support, and it makes all the difference for everything that we do. Of course, to our subscribers, thank you. You keep us going and delivering the stories that we have for you. And we're going to do quite a lot this year to really send things out of the park. By the way, it's The Spy Who Loved Me. There she is, Anna Chapman, and her modeling career after the fact. I wanted to read a little piece of something that Grusch sent to me, so that we have some understanding about the nature and the tone, and why more of the information that we exchange is going to come out because of this kind of stranglehold that Mellon has on the field. But something that he wrote to me is interesting, is that he says, I've been following your work, and this is David Grusch. I've been following your work for quite some time, and I'm aware of your recent discussions regarding myself. While I'm associated with certain individuals you have concerns about, and honestly, that's very warranted. There is more than meets the eye. And he talks here about X-Protect and all the rest. But one thing that he has something to put across here that I kind of clued in on when I was reading it. It was just like the conversation I had with him on the phone. It has this air to it. And here it is again. While I'm associated with certain individuals you have concerns about, and honestly, that's very warranted. So if you have those concerns about those people, why are you in business with them? So I guess I would round out the Grusch conversation that way. And I considered it a tremendous disappointment that somebody who was, on the inside and watched this show and things of that nature got wrapped up in that stuff. And then when faced with an opportunity basically to defy it, went and, got deeper into that whole thing. So, and the types of things that we're seeing with him involved with the CIA Homeland Security people and giving those presentations and how things are going to go this year. So, whatever direction that is, it has nothing to do with me or the types of things that I do on this show. So if you appreciate this show, Grusch, the stuff that you're doing has nothing to do with it. And, if I were you, I'd check in with myself and my ethical radar about what you're doing with the information that you have. And if you're under Chris Mellon's thumb, say so, because there are people in this field who will support you and know La Cosa Nostra Mellon would be able to do anything to you under those circumstances. So my advice, make that type of trepidation that you have about Mellon public, as I've done here tonight. And with that, I will do a couple of shout outs.
Do you think he just made a deal with the devil and that, he can't?
I don't know him well enough to say that.
Okay.
I really don't. And also he talks in a lot of intelligence speak. So the only thing that I can say is, obviously, if he watches this show, he understood some of the stuff. And so, they're not just talking points in the grand scheme of things. They are, they're really crucial understandings when you're dealing with that level of secrecy. So if you've been in a career of secrecy and intelligence, and your whole thing is, I'm going to bring this out and all the rest of it, you can't be COO of Soul Foundation and do that. Those people are already in with Fauci and the CIA and all those people. It's not going to work. That is a fundamentally incompatible association. So just like my association with Grusch would be fundamentally incompatible if you're going to, work with the CIA people. And it doesn't matter to them anyway, because he stopped contacting me, which is good. I mean, fine. My point is really that whole thing. If you want real transparency, instead of saying, oh, I know how to work the inside deal and this lever and, high five the CIA over here at the same time. No, it doesn't work that way. There's a very simple thing, actually. It comes from the Bible. Here I am, the Bible thumper at the end of the show. But it says, at a certain point, this guy wants to be a disciple of Christ. And Christ says, good, give away, all your money and follow me. It's a tough thing, but he was Christ after all. And the guy was like, oh, this is a hard thing that you're asking me to do. And Christ says, look, you can't serve God and mammon. Make a choice and live with it. And I think that that's very good advice. So, and with that, everyone, we had a great night being here with you. There's more to come. And the Anna Chapman story, I think, is just opening up and absolutely fascinating. And we're going to get more of that to you. We will see you all next week. And I want to remind you, we have this very important presentation coming up February 25th. It is Apotheum. And this goes deep to election 2024, and it goes deep, the UFO file and the presidency. You're not going to want to miss it. And if I can leave you with anything, it's that, we lost 8 years ago an incredible, artistic, spacey, genius kind of a guy. But he was there in our thoughts. And of course, it also would have been Bowie's. Well, let's see. He was born in 1947. So it would have been his 76th birthday. Happy birthday, David. Incredible legacy. And, we know there's a starman waiting in the sky. I'll do a couple of shout outs for everyone here. Jessica Rodriguez is out there. Yes. The 25th, be there. It'll be an event. I can tell you that right on this channel, right here. If you're on the newsletter list, go to darkjournalist.com and sign up for the newsletter. If you're on that newsletter list, you're going to find a really incredible experience there on the 25th. Let's see. Is that Max Headroom? No, it's the Thin White Duke. Liberty Thunder. Hey, Liberty. Roosevelt. Thanks, DJ and Olivia, for keeping it spicy. Oh, was on the spicy side tonight. There's no question about it. The spy who loved me like heaven above me. I wonder if she's related. Love you, DJ. Tina Borich. Thank you, Tina. Great to have you out there. Gigi Young was out there. Watch Gigi's last presentation, which she is very nicely made available at, if you check Gigi Young here on YouTube. Absolutely incredible. You don't want to miss it. And Mr. Wolf, changes. Exactly. I thought you were going to say Diamond Dogs there, but Sun Machine. Hey. I probably will listen to Diamond Dogs later. Let's see. Don Neway. They build a Bowie statue in Aylesbury by the club I used to go to. Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Can't wait. David Bowie. Yes. Ziggy himself. Let's see. Ziggy, Halloween Jack, Aladdin Sane, Screaming Lord Byron, Rehoboth Farm. Thank you. Hey, I like that. The Thin White Duke. Exactly. Now you're talking. Wally Tango. Great to have everyone out there tonight. Gypsy Moon. Sweet ideas from Indeed. Yeah, what do you got?
Chris Lothian says, I met Bowie once, took the afternoon off school, and went and got both his and Mick Ronson's autographs.
Excellent.
Awesome.
I met Bowie not once, but twice. And they were both incredible, very interesting encounters. One, I noticed one thing about Bowie, which is interesting. He'd stare right at you. He'd sort of stare through you when he was talking to you. And then he would look off as if he was, thinking about what to say or whatever, or being informed by some supernatural being. So he would look at you while you were talking about something, and then he would go to explain something, and he'd look off into the universe or something. He was a very interesting guy. Talked very fast, but was very, very gracious with his time. And I had a good conversation with him. Oh, let's see here. And fantastic music. My God. Love Gigi's work. Indeed, Beth. I agree with you highly. Excellent work, and everyone should check it out. Philippe, thank you, sir. Wow, fantastic. Bo Krills, he had 2 of something. We'll find out in the next episode. Don Neway, yes, sir. Alan the Alien, maybe you can tell us about the UFO file. There we go. Ching-a-ling, exactly. There you're talking.
Wow, that's a real fan.
Great show as always. Thank you, Gail. Wow. Rose Thistle Artworks. Corey Anderson. I know Dr. Farrell was out there. Fantastic. I know Kate's out there. It's great to see you. 4 more hours, DJ. Well, you're almost right. You're going to get some bonus time coming up. So watch me now. Let's see here. Let's see. Joseph Tugas. Rick. Something about the Amish there. We should do a show on the Amish, actually. Healthiest group around. Let's see. Jimmy Kimmener. Yes. What is it? Love your enemy like you love yourself. Well, that is really something. That's the toughest part. Incompatible. Exactly. Fubar Fighter is out there, everyone. Wow, what a great crew and the ideas from tonight. The questions, Miss Olivia, bravo, sensational, just off the charts. Great stuff. Someone asked me what I was reading. Yes, it's Forbidden Hospitality, one of the very interesting Tall Whites books. Let's see if I have anything else for you here. I referenced an episode earlier.
Hospitality.
Oh, yeah. What did I say?
Forbidden because of this.
Oh, Forbidden Science. Right. Yeah, that was the original New York Post when our friend Chapman got grabbed. She was From Russia with Love. Unbelievable. I know I had something else here to show. What the heck was it? Unbelievable. And it's all the modeling shots here.
While you're looking for that,
yeah.
Everybody says that their cats love your voice. And I just wanted to share this. Ray Story
voiceover?
Said, my cat Scooter Pooter is watching the show as usual. And Free Spirit said, I have my cat on me, watching DJ with me. She's actually watching, listening, kneading, and dribbling. LOL.
Just remember, just keep Dorothy in mind. And she had Toto there, and I guess you have your cat. So now we're talking. We will see you all next week. And never let it be forgot. Once there was Camelot, and there can be again. It's great to have everyone out there and the ideas from tonight, and a very interesting, wild ride it was with you indeed. We'll see you all next week. Have a great weekend.
God bless.
And of course, it says end broadcast, but after all, Miss Olivia.
Never really ends.
Well, it never really ends. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bo Krills. Hey. Have a great weekend.